Good morning, everyone. We are live. We're going to start the meeting. Let's see if we have more people arriving too. Okay. So, Yvette?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We will get started with a few housekeeping items. This meeting is being live streamed today. There will be an opportunity for questions after each presentation. Representatives from local, state, and tribal partners will have an opportunity to provide updates during agenda item 9. We will take public comment from those who are in the room present. Please submit a comment card, and it'll be during agenda item number 10. And thank you all for attending. Back now to you, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you, Yvette. Good morning, everybody. My name is not Drew Bartlett. Director Bartlett is up in Washington, D.C. this morning, dealing with some of the ecosystem restoration components of the CNS system, as we all continue to strive for balance and maximization of benefits for the region. So I'm going to cover for him today, helping to ensure, obviously we're all here helping to ensure that the CNSF system is operating effectively today, and that we have appropriate plans in place to adapt to tomorrow's changed conditions. That's always got to be front of mind with 9 million residents here in South Florida. Once again, 2024 has brought us a lot of wind and water. Hurricanes Helene and Milton, as you know, put a lot of stress on the northern end of the system, and also was problematic for our friends and neighbors on the southwest coast. As always, hurricane response and recovery efforts continue to be a challenge, but we're really proud of the way state agencies and water management districts across the state and local communities have responded. Under Governor DeSantis, I think DEM in particular is doing an amazing job of helping communities get back on their feet as quickly as possible post-storm. And we're currently working with the Division of Emergency Management and the legislature to understand what post-disaster funding opportunities may be available. And certainly we will look at any and all opportunities to enhance the regional flood control system as well. In that vein, I know the district continues to work on identifying projects to increase system capacity as appropriate. And in doing so, you know, one of the big things that has been done here for a long time, certainly, are all of the advances in flood vulnerability assessments and adaptation planning taking place. And part of why we're here today with this coordination forum speaks to the enhanced coordination that's happening in this district specifically, working with counties and working with counties to advance those planning efforts. I hear some of our most recent updates are complete now for Osceola, Orange, and Palm Beach counties. And I hear up next on the slate, St. Lucie and Martin counties should be expecting some calls if they haven't already gotten to work on it. We also have our good partners from the Army Corps of Engineers Jacksonville District here, and the district continues their work on ongoing key studies for flood risk management, including the Section 216, the Section 203 for Broward Basins that hopefully everybody saw. The beginning of the NEPA process just was announced yesterday for that. We also have some work up in the Everglades headwaters of Shingle Creek, and then altogether enhanced integration of coastal risk models and everything that we're doing there. And really the fruit of all that planning is the initiation of design and construction of several key resilience projects in high-risk areas, including 3 major basin resilience projects in Miami-Dade and Broward counties, the S27, S28, and S29, that are all being funded with FEMA BRIC and Resilient Florida grants. And so that's a great step forward to actually get out of, the relentless planning cycle and actually start making a difference for folks on the ground. The progress from the Water Management District is really a testament to the dedication of Dr. Moran and her team, but it's also a testament to the value of forums like this one that allow everybody to get out in front of things as we're trying to work through them. It's easy to look around this room most of the time and see competition for resources, but the reality is that none of us can do the work necessary to fulfill our individual missions and secure the long-term resilience of our jurisdictions without our neighbors also achieving their missions. So you're doing the hard work up front, and your communities are benefiting from it, and I'm here to tell you to keep up the good work. Next week, I'll be with the St. Johns River Water Management District to deliver the same message to them as they grow their own regional coordination efforts, which are closely modeled after yours. At the state level, we've really been prioritizing quite a number of efforts, but among the most exciting for me personally is our basin level flood modeling inventory that we've been doing in coordination with the Silver Jackets and the Florida Flood Hub. This is going to be a really important achievement in terms of having, for the first time ever, all publicly available flood modeling for the state accessible in one place. And also allowing us to begin to standardize, where appropriate, future data collection and modeling work for basins where such information and tools are currently lacking. South Florida Water Management District and the other 4 water management districts have all been really tremendous partners in that endeavor. Looking to the future, I also urge you all to be ready for the near imminent release of the FY 25-26 statewide resilience plan, and be prepared to work with your legislative delegations to help us fund that plan, okay? It's not enough to just have your project in a good spot. We actually need the legislature to appropriate funding in order for us to execute. And then looking a little further into the future, just to put something onto everybody's radar, Hurricanes Helene and Milton are very likely going to result in DEM gaining access to upwards of another $2 billion in additional FEMA hazard mitigation grant program funding to complement the nearly $1.1 billion currently working on being executed for Hurricane Ian. This is very likely, in my estimation, significantly more funding than the impacted communities can absorb. So it's really critical that every county in the state have updated and robust local mitigation strategy project lists and be prepared to submit applications when leftover HMGP funds become available. Again, I want to reiterate for everybody, you do not have to have been impacted by this year's hurricanes in order to successfully secure HMGP funding. You just have to be ready to go when DEM exhausts funding for projects through their Tier 1 and Tier 2 processes, which again, I think is a pretty strong likelihood with the amount of funds that will be available. So again, thank you all very much. I'm really looking forward to the discussion that'll take place today, and I can open up the floor for any questions before turning the meeting back over to Dr. Moran.
Any questions from around the room? Any? Okay. I'll invite everybody, if you want to sit on the table, please join us. ICDOT and Everglades Foundation, join us. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. Thank you for the ones online as well. As we approach the end of the year, I really wanted to just start this meeting saying that we are thankful for so many things that we have been achieving, and as emphasized by Wes in his initial talking points, a lot of the progress we are making is really through the collaboration that we are having with the counties, our 16 counties and municipalities in our area. We are able to advance a significant amount of coordination efforts and projects that are being born through this coordination, and really the way that we can look at the flooding issues and the resiliency needs that we have in our region in an integrated way, and really being able to advance and prioritize where we should start and how should we start, knowing that we all have limited resources from all types of, for all different types. So again, thankful for the opportunity to have you all collaborating with us, coming and meeting with us when we have those quarterly forums, but not only that, coordinating in a series of other initiatives that we have going on so far. Planning efforts, we do have a series of planning efforts that are overlapping, and we count always with the feedback, comments, and participation from the community here, from the counties, from the municipalities, from the 298 districts. So this is essential for us to be able to continue to do the work. And again, really wanted to say that we are very grateful for all the opportunities that we have to work with you all. I wanted to start just by giving some updates. We do have a new team member, Robert Caracho. He's sitting on the back. Robert, if you want to join us on the table too, please come. He joined our team on Monday, so it's his day 3. He actually replaced Jenny, who is sitting here. We allowed the Army Corps to give those slides hiring people, and they did to pick a person from our team. We already told them, and Yvette knows they cannot show that slide anymore here. But anyway, Robert is here with us, and he's going to be leading the 216 process with the Army Corps and also supporting Matt on the 203 process. So 2 major planning efforts, and we are really happy to have him joining the team. He's coming with full speed. Only those 3 days that third day that he's having here, he's already getting a lot of the work and a lot of the things in place, and really already kind of getting to the key questions that I'm happy he's asking. So welcome to the team, Robert. We were waiting for you to come, and really excited to have you helping us on those key studies that we are advancing. Just to show quickly how the team is structured now that we have Robert joining, we do have the planning area that is shown here in blue under the supervision of Nicole. So we continue to have the contractors that were here doing incredible work. This is definitely an area that is more consolidated in the team. We have been doing that for almost 5 years now. And we are stepping into the green implementation, really walking a significant number of steps as we really begin design and construction to some projects. That has been our key effort this year, to really be able to start and move into the construction implementation of projects. Is really exciting, it's really demanding, it's challenging, but we are really making significant steps as we kind of put the grants that we receive into implementation. I see Logan just arriving, one of the designers that are working with us. So significant work in this side of the house now that is really going to carry a ton of the design. And as we have the 2 projects, 216 and 203, really focusing on advancing design, 30% design, class 3 cost estimate for the Corps, they are really under this implementation umbrella too here in our team. As mentioned, Hurricane Helene and Milton, we did have significant impacts through the state, less impacts in South Florida. We are very grateful for that, but it's still a lot of hours and a lot of efforts that were spent through those 2 major hurricanes that were in this season. As a water management district, of course, we had the EOC activated during those 2 events, and we performed the immediate actions to reduce the water levels, so really strategic down-drawn of the system prior to the tropical storm, recovery operations. We deploy pumps, again, not as much as we did in Ian, but we did deploy pumps, temporary pumps in the upper Kissimmee chain of lakes due to some of the levels that we were seeing that were going high there. Thanks, again, being super grateful for the opportunity to not have seen significant impacts due to a lot of proactive actions and also being on top of the system. I emphasized something yesterday, actually, in a conversation through the Water and Climate Alliance with St. John's River Water Management District. We learned so many lessons after Ian, and our ability to go through this event with information. We had 2 water stages, two new gauges in partnership with the USGS, rapid deployment gauges that were installed in two locations, one paid by us, one paid by St. John's, that we used throughout the storms to monitor the levels, exactly where we deployed the pumps early on. So again, it's data getting to us early. It's us having the ability to see all of that and take the action that we needed to do, and then really resulting in less impacts. This was a smaller event, but at the same time, I am 100% sure we were better prepared to deal with that storm. And high water marks, photo observations that we also collected through the event. I'm going to touch a little bit after on this too. This wet king tide season is nearing the end. It's the end already. But we did just want to emphasize that we were very thankful for the support that you all gave us throughout the season. I think we had, finally, it was the year one that we had all the tools fully operational, consolidated in this agency. We receive a significant amount of data from all the counties through those events in the year, beginning early on with some rainfall event that we had in June. But anyway, tools are up and running. But not only that, the tools up and running really do not do anything if we don't have the participation from the counties, from the municipalities, from the population that is being impacted. And we saw a lot of information getting through us. And again, giving us the opportunity to better respond and anticipate risks. So again, thank you for everybody that collaborated to put those tools up and running, to train, to attend the trainings, and to also utilize throughout the events. During the king tide season, I'm also listing there just the enhanced tidal forecast. One more year two of those enhanced tidal forecasts that we deploy every Monday. Again, very well received. We have a closing meeting Friday the 6th to really wrap up the work, the contract that we have with the University of Miami. And again, an excellent work that was deployed for us to have the ability to really anticipate risks in case we were seeing any exacerbated conditions during king tides. This is just a glance, one event, Hurricane Milton. So this is the map that we have in our flood repository, and the different sources of data that we were able to compile after the event. So our flood reports, our high water marks team that were deployed in collaboration with Lee County, upon their request, we also had, we linked to the Broward County Document the Flood Survey to the Fort Lauderdale. We have other counties that we are working on. We are working right now with St. Lucie to establish the link with there too as well. We have a voluntary, actually, effort that goes through the URISA, funded through URISA, the Army Corps effort too, that is able to compile data from social media that we integrated here. And again, just information that is important for us through the event. But not only that, we are definitely using this data also to better calibrate our models. We have been doing some analysis on how this vulnerabilities here and how the models are telling, and we are seeing a lot of convergence in the way that we are seeing the things. So again, good to have this data so we can better calibrate the models. Still on the data, I know I've been emphasizing a lot there, but we just sharing some updates from the water and climate resilience metrics. We have Chapter A and Chapter B drafts published. They are open for comments. The comments, we went in about, I believe, until the end of the month or early next year. And the publication is March 1st. So if you want to take a look on what we have produced this year, Chapter A is really the water year, all the events that were there. And then Chapter B, we have data on evapotranspiration this year, and then the salinity trend in the Florida Bay. We are planning for a phase 2 deployment of water and climate metrics. We were very successful on the first 3 years of this program. We were able to map 50 metrics that were listed when we started this program, and right now we are listing a few more. We actually have about 5 new metrics that we are planning to bring to the set and some additional analysis. So new data analysis, enhanced monitoring and analysis, and of course, ongoing updates to the metrics that we have. We are circulating this internal document that we use to be able to get the approval to use the time from some of the technical leads that will be involved on this effort. Under, again, the coordination of our team, Nicole and Stephanie are here. They are the ones leading this effort. And we are working continuously very close with the Florida Flood Hub. All this data that we are looking here, of course, it's part of what the Florida Flood Hub is using in terms of how we can monitor conditions today and in the future. And also there is a very important collaboration that we are initiating with the Florida Flood Hub on the development of an ocean atmospheric statewide regional model. This is what's going to help us to reduce uncertainties as we look into the future, using the latest and greatest science that is out there to support us. And not only that, looking at Florida. Florida is not the same when we look at the whole continental U.S. There are some specific processes that needs to be really well formulated for our peninsula, and that's really a lot of the goal of this effort here in collaboration with the Florida Flood Hub. We are really excited to get this moving. We did receive an initial funding from DOT, DEP, water management districts to be able to advance this work. On the water supply vulnerability assessment update, we continue to develop the tool. This is the groundwater modeling tool that we have here in the house. We had a very great meeting yesterday talking about the process and where they are. This is one of the greatest models that we can say that we have here in South Florida now, really groundwater model with the variable density, fully able to monitor saltwater intrusion. So it's being developed right now, it's still in the context of the Lower East Coast Plan, looking at a 20-25-year scenario. We will, as soon as those runs are completed, we will step into a 5-year horizon here, looking ahead to 2075. And again, just utilizing the same sea level rise curves that we are utilizing for the 25-year horizon, and also adding to that future climate scenarios. We are really excited with this work. They are making great progress. They were joking yesterday about the level of calibration of the model. It was a very impressive discussion, and I'm super proud of seeing the work being developed the way it is. The goal of this is, of course, characterize those future impacts on water supply sources and inform resiliency strategies. How can we really start anticipating and addressing those? In terms of data for all those runs, what we are working right now is finalizing the drought scenarios. We have data that came through a collaboration with the USGS and FIU. We are looking at that, and we are mimicking the processes that were done to extract data from climate models and really characterize on how we do this and how this is distributed, especially in Florida. There is a lot of things that happen here, and we need to be able to characterize all of that in spatial pattern that is adequate to the work that we do here. So we are doing this work in-house. We are also working on future land use and population distribution by utility service area. And then this is going to then be entering the model as part of the public supply and irrigation wells, which is how we kind of bring this information to the model. We are anticipating those runs to be started in the summer 2025. Another vulnerability assessment, the flood protection level of service. I know everybody's more familiar with this. We have been making significant progress on the past years on that. We do have some ongoing studies. Dr. Brooks mentioned about Palm Beach County and Upper Kissimmee Basin being finalized right now. We will have a significant number of project recommendations that are coming from this phase 1 studies in Palm Beach and Upper Kissimmee. We are anticipating between 25-30 new projects added to the plan from those two areas this year. We also, as we mentioned, we received funding from DEP to advance San Luis Martin County. We're going to do a joint phase 1, phase 2 study there, which is really great. So we can not only identify initial projects, but we can also go all the way to testing feasibility of those projects and really developing more advanced adaptation strategies. So excited to be moving on this effort as well. For a phase 2, we are finishing the C7 basin. That was one very needed basin. We completed C8, C9. We didn't have C7, which is really part of the same basin, and also C7 was never in the model format that was needed for us to develop the Army Corps study, so we used that effort to really bring the modeling tools there to the C7, comparable to what we already had in all the other regions, and now we are using to really test some additional alternatives there in parallel to what we are already doing as part of the Army Corps studies. And we kick off Western Basins, FPLOS phase 1 study. We're just in the beginning where we are doing the report about the model development. I mentioned projects coming to the plan next year, but this year we just published the sea level rise and flood resiliency plan. We had the consolidated report also published on October 1st. We are kicking off activities for the 2025 update. That's going to be our year 5 plan update. And what we are anticipating is a new schedule. We are not going to be updating this plan every year anymore. I think we reached a place where we have now a good, more comprehensive plan document. We'll certainly need to update projects list and have the latest and greatest information about the project status there. But again, the plan itself, we are going to be establishing a new schedule to update the plan after we publish this year. What is exciting is that we are also going to be aligning this planning effort with the statewide sea level rise and flood resiliency plan. So the state is also developing the same similar effort, but now for the first time developing with the tools and the data that they develop. So we're going to discuss as part of the 2025 update how we can align our process with the process that is going to be carried by the state now. For that, we're going to be doing 3 engagement workshops and to really get input and discuss all those things before we publish the draft, like we do every year. The draft is usually published in May every year. What we're going to do is we're going to host those workshops ahead, get some input, and then publish the drafts for overall public comment. So 3 engagement workshops that we are planning to be in February. That's the date we are anticipating. We're beginning to look for sites, and we'll be confirming the date soon. So 1 in the East Coast, 1 in the West Coast, and then 1 in the Upper Kissimmee Basin. I mentioned the consolidated report. So every year after we publish the plan, we also have to produce a consolidated report that lists the status of the implementation of all the projects in the plan. And of course, when we have projects through the CNSF Study Avenue, we have to publish them through that report. This is a mandate that was given to us, so we submitted that to the governor and legislators on October 1st. I am so glad we talk about the funding to hazard mitigation programs already today, and I'm really going to emphasize this one more time in this slide. So the first step that we did this year more formally was to make sure that the projects that we have in the resiliency plan are fully incorporated into the local mitigation strategy plans. We have been doing that every year. We have a more consolidated process at this time, and we are really coordinating on a one-on-one basis with all the LMS at each county to make sure that they have the latest and greatest information, cost estimates, and project descriptions. This is what is also giving us the opportunity to line up projects for the new disaster funding that Wes just mentioned here. So there is a significant list of projects that we have out there. We already initiated some internal coordination to see if there is any project that we would like to prioritize under this umbrella. We have a lot of findings from not only the post-disaster analysis, like when we evaluate EM, we had already developed a significant list, and we advanced 4 projects in the Upper Kissimmee Basin at that time, but the list had originally, I would say, 15. So we are revisiting that list, looking at priorities that were established right back then and seeing what were the vulnerabilities that we saw still during Milton this year. So this list is coming, and we will also inform all the local mitigation strategies in terms of how we are prioritizing those projects, and we'll be updating the information with them too. The first one we are tracking is Osceola. I know the deadline is December 12th to submit the projects for them to their list, so they will be updating the ranking. So again, we are working very closely with the local mitigation strategy committees, and we'll be definitely identifying some of the priority projects and areas that we know it's important that we start advancing some steps. This is actually the list from Ian. I mentioned 4 projects in the Upper Kissimmee Basin. We have 2 more, one in the West Coast, microwave tower, and also culverts along the LA Canal and Corbett area. So we submitted those projects last year through the disaster declaration 4673. Ian, we have a tier 1 recommendation right now for the BCB microwave tower. We are with the anticipated date of award. It's end of January, so we are working with the project team. We do have already a bid that was out, so we are kind of starting this project. We are waiting for DM to authorize us to get the notice to proceed. We have this other project that we're still finalizing. I believe we are on the final stages of signing all the documentation, and there is the final document that we signed with DEM is related to the structure of the cash flow on each of those projects. So we are pending 2 or 3 of that. So I'm expecting that those would be the final RFIs that we will be receiving for those projects. So again, working very closely with DM team on all the review for all those projects. All of those are actually in Tier 2, so we are waiting for the Tier 1 awards to be completed to then reallocate funding. Hopefully we can get a few of those funded. And then on the bottom here is just the 2024 Resilient Florida, not the grants that we applied this year, the grants that we applied last year. Those were the awards that we received. We are working on with the DEP team to be able to get those 3 grants moving. No new grant proposals, just to get an overview to you on what is the progress we are making here. So as we mentioned, new Resiliency Florida grants submitted earlier this year in September. We are working on 3 grants under the FEMA BRIC umbrella. We submitted a notice of intent to DM. We are partnering with a few counties on those grants as listed there. And we continue on the ongoing coordination with the grant partners, and we are really working on some design concepts for those 3 BRIC grants that we need to submit right now. The FOMA, sorry, I missed one item here. The notice of funding opportunity has not been published yet for FEMA BRIC, and we are waiting for the details on that before we can finalize our 3 proposals. Those are the 3 proposals. We have one at C6. We are exploring the opportunity to move water, interbasin connectivity. So C7, C8, C9, and how we can utilize connection with the C8 there to move water around. So try to, when we have room and when we have opportunity, if the rain is more on the south or more on the north, we are trying to see if we can move water between those basins. There is, of course, associated storage options under consideration as we move water between those basins. For C9, we are working on a canal enhancement proposal that brings opportunities for storage and conveyance and nature-based features. We are working on design concepts for that. As I mentioned, there are some improvements that we need to work on the design concept that we have for this, and we are working with the engineering team on that. And also, we are looking at a temporary storage area. Miami-Dade County reached us. They are interested in this large parcel that is next to the canal, and we are looking on how this can be serving the overall purpose of flood reduction in the area. And then C12, we have distributed stormwater storage options in partnership with the City of Lauderhill. They identify some of the projects they have interest in investing. We are also looking at canal enhancement very closely with the Section 203 study here. So really getting ourselves on one side looking at storage, and then allowing the 203 process with the Corps to really look at the conveyance and the components and the gate structure. And also there are some covers and flap gates that we saw in the basin in collaboration with the city that we are also looking to bring. Moving into implementation, I mentioned the 3 DEP Resilient Florida grants. We are doing, so we have 3 from 2 years ago. We are doing site reviews and continue on the progress on quarterly reports. We also have the agreement signed with Palm Beach County. That was something that we did in about a month ago, but it's fully executed, so the funding to one of the projects is also coming from Palm Beach County. And we are, again, thankful for the opportunity to partner with the county. We have also the planning effort with Martin, St. Lucie County that is ongoing. For FEMA, we have the 3 grants executed. Those are the 3 BRIC that we received, C7, C8, C9. And we have to also sign the interagency agreements with the counties that are partnering with us. So we have South Broward Drainage District and Miami-Dade County. We're going on the final review of those 3 agreements. And we also have some memorandum of agreements with key stakeholders, mostly related to real estate interest in all those, for all the project components in those basins. And also we have the Innovative Tech Grant with the EP. We submitted the final work plan and the QUP plan to the EP, and they're under the final review to execute that agreement. What we hosted this past quarter, very important work, interagency workshops for each of the projects with all the project stakeholders. We also did some site visits. So very important right now at this phase that we are stepping into full construction to be able to coordinate very closely with the local partners with where those projects are going to be located. There are significant interests from many angles that we are seeking to balance as we implement those projects. And this here is just a picture of one of the site visits that we did in one of the sites in Miami-Dade for the S29. We are actually partnering with Miami. It's a park, Granos Park, in the area that we're going to be bringing the pump. They have a very, very good and valuable resource in this park, hammocks that are endangered species, listed as part of some of the endangered species, and we were able to really visit the site with all the design team to be able to see how we can best accommodate the project footprint to minimize impacts to this area as well. Army Corps, I don't need to enter into too many details on my last two update slides here. We'll have presentations from Matt, team, and Jenny later today, but basically on the 203, as we have been saying, we initiated the coordination. That we had a public meeting on October 24, and we're going to have a next scoping meeting on December 10. And for the 216, we are continuing to coordinate on the final approval for the new scope and budget. We've finished the future without, and we are working with the Corps on agency technical review memo that's going to document all the progress that was done in the 216 that we are leveraging as part of the 203. This is very important because we did got some consensus on modeling approach, assumptions, as we were developing the 216 that we need to be fully documented so we can apply also as part of the 203. I know Wes mentioned those two efforts here. I want to go back just to emphasize our collaboration with the state here. The flood risk modeling effort, the repository dashboard that is being developed through the Silver Jackets coordination. We have submitted our projects along with projects from all water management districts and some local projects. They have a statewide user interface web map that is being tested right now, very user-friendly, very nice to be able to have this big picture on what we have in terms of flood modeling resources in our region, and really what are the important considerations that we need to be aware and conscious about when we are really saying that we have a flood risk model. So there are some processes that needs to be fully characterized there, and we are taking care of that too. Sometimes it's not as simple as just to say you have a flood model. We need to make sure that we are ensuring that some key processes, physical processes that contribute to flood risks are there characterized in the model. And then here, the statewide regional climate model, the ocean atmospheric model is really, we're assisting the Florida Flood Hub right now on the contract execution. We are receiving funding from DEP, and we will be supporting one of the contracts. We have two universities working, University of Miami, Florida State University, and the USGS. So we are just acting as one of the admin support on the contracts execution to one of those contracts. Again, thank you for all for being here. We have a survey if you want to send us feedback and suggestions, and we are announcing now the 2025 meeting dates. So we will send, I believe we already sent. If not, we are sending the calendar placeholders to you all. And again, thank you for your participation. Some of the events that we're anticipating to happen here. Water Reuse is actually tomorrow. They have a resiliency panel, and the Climate Leadership Summit on December 16 and 18 in the Key West. Thank you, everyone. I will open up for questions, and I will sit there here just in case anybody has any. Okay. Any questions, any comments? With that, I'm going to invite Pete, yes, Pete Kawakowski, and he's our Water Resources Evaluation Section Administrator in the agency, and he's going to give us an update on the saltwater intrusion modeling, the 2024 maps.
Thank you, Carolina. I was here last August, and I presented the saltwater intrusion mapping effort that we did in 2019, and I mentioned that we were going to be updating that in 2024, and that's why I'm here today. I've made presentations on this information over the last month or two, first in Naples at our Big Cypress Basin Board, a few weeks back at Broward County Water Advisory Board, and then this past Monday at the Palm Beach County Water Resources Task Force. And today is going to be a little bit broader than that. It's going to compile all the information, highlights from all the different areas of the South Florida Water Management District, and I'd like to cover that today. So I'd like to highlight the Water Management District staff that did all the heavy lifting on this. I'm doing the light lifting today with the presentation, but these folks did a lot of work in terms of compiling information, conducting quality assurance and quality control, developing the maps, and doing all those things to make this a viable product. So what I'm going to cover today is just some of the saltwater intrusion basics and our aquifer systems over here, its importance to well fields and our infrastructure, our project approach, the results of the mapping effort for all the different coastal aquifers, and then some conclusions and next steps. Before I get into that, I do want to talk about where this started, and that was in 2009. We recognized that sea level rise was something that we were going to have to really start dealing with in earnest, and that we recognized that there weren't a lot of periodic maps. There were none actually. It was kind of done, one-offs. There was one in Palm Beach County done in 1987 that the USGS did, and then the GS did one for Broward County in 1990. But there really wasn't a comprehensive look at this and doing it periodically to track the issue. So that's kind of what we decided that we would do, and we did it for all of our coastal aquifers within our district, with the exception of Miami-Dade County, and that's because Miami-Dade County contracts with the USGS for them to do it for them, and we didn't want to duplicate efforts. So that's what I'll be presenting today. So what are some of the common sources of saltwater intrusion? We have our graphic on the right that shows some of those potential sources. We have lateral intrusion from the coast, and that's probably the most common. We have vertical intrusion, which we call upconing, which is poor quality or salty water moving upward into the shallower portions of the aquifer, typically as a result of pumping. We have surface infiltration from estuaries and boat basins and salt marshes and things like that, canals. And then finally, there's a couple of instances where there's a relict or trapped seawater that was present in previous stands of sea level rise for tens and thousands of years ago that never got flushed out as a result of freshening of those aquifers. And that's typically present in some low permeability aquifers. So that's another source that's not always present, but there's a couple of instances where it is. So I'll cover that today. Okay, so this is important. This is the generalized hydrogeology of South Florida. If you were to take Peninsula Florida and take a slice of it, this is what it would look. On the west, you have Naples and Fort Myers and the Gulf of Mexico. On the east, you have the Atlantic Ocean. And these are the different aquifer systems that we have. It's a little more complicated, the hydrogeology on the lower west coast. We have the water table aquifer, the lower Tamiami aquifer, the sandstone, and the mid-Hawthorne, and then obviously the Florida aquifer system. It's a little bit less complicated on the east coast where we are today, and it's pretty much the Biscayne or surficial aquifer system. So I'm going to be covering saltwater intrusion in each of those aquifer systems. I'm not going to be covering, we haven't developed maps for the Florida aquifer system because that is, at least in our neck of the woods, it's of brackish quality already, so we really don't need to track saltwater intrusion per se. So I think every presentation should probably cover this. Is why is this important? Why are we doing this? Well, public water supply well fields are a major water supply source. Groundwater is probably 98% of the water supply for certainly South Florida. And it's really important to protect that. And we do that by installing monitor wells and measuring water quality, like chlorides and total dissolved solids, and tracking the potential movement of the saltwater front within the aquifer as a result of various stresses, principally pumping stresses, when there's a drought or a water shortage that results in lowered groundwater elevations, and therefore that stress results in some of that salt water moving inland. So we need to track those things. Once salt water enters production wells and things like that, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse that. So that's why it's so important to have monitor wells in advance of the production wells to make sure we're keeping track of that and making sure that salt water doesn't enter those production wells, although it has happened historically. It's very expensive to relocate well fields and all the associated infrastructure, the pipelines, the treatment plants, and all of those processes. And quite frankly, there's not a whole lot of land to relocate them to right now, even if we wanted to. So it's so important to track the movement of the saltwater front to make sure that we are protecting the investments that utilities and others have made for those public water supply sources. And then finally, other sources of water like the brackish floor and aquifer, it's much more expensive to treat compared to our surficial aquifer system, which is fresh. More and more utilities are tapping into that to offset their future demands, but it has to be treated with reverse osmosis, which is it's costly and it's energy intensive. And again, we need to do whatever we can to sustain our surficial aquifer and the freshwater sources that are associated with that. So again, in 2009, we talked about what are we going to do? And we decided that we would map the saltwater interface and all of the coastal aquifers in our water management district, again, with the exception of Miami-Dade County, and that we would develop these maps every 5 years. It turns out that's more than sufficient in terms of tracking, and I think you'll be able to see that when you take a look at the results of the maps of where the interface has moved since 2009. We use all available data. We have access from data from the USGS monitor wells, our own monitor wells. We got great cooperation from local governments and counties to help us with the mapping effort this year. And then another big source is water use permittees. All that information comes into our regulation database, which is, again, available to us to develop these maps. We're mapping the furthest inland extent of the saltwater interface, and that typically happens at the conclusion of the dry season. And all the data that we compile is coming from March, April, and May of 2024, this year. The interface is defined by us as the 250 milligrams per liter chloride value. And that's the drinking water standard, so it seems very appropriate to use that. And that's what we do to draw the interface. It's referred to as an isochlor, or a line of equal chloride values. And again, as I mentioned, we do it for all the coastal aquifers on the West Coast, the water table, lower Tamiami, sandstone, and mid-Hawthorne aquifers, and then over on the East Coast, mostly the Biscayne aquifer or surficial aquifer system. So we're generating a map, and it's a two-dimensional map, but in the reality, the saltwater interface is a three-dimensional feature. On the right, you can see in a vertical cross-section what the interface looks like. It's the red line, and it's complicated because we're drawing it as a single line, but in reality is the interface is diffuse front. There's mixing between saltwater along the coast coming inland and freshwater, and it's really a zone of diffusion, or a transition zone is really what's going on in terms of the saltwater interface, but we're representing it as a single line of, again, 250 milligrams per liter chlorides. Another complicating factor, it's a dynamic feature. As a result of rainfall, changes in rainfall, changes in wellfield pumpage and things like that, the interface is moving, not a lot, but it is moving, all the time. And so we're representing it right at the end of the dry season. It's probably the furthest inland for the year that we're talking about, but it's a snapshot in time, and that's what we're trying to represent. And I mentioned earlier that there are different sources of salt water that can be occurring in the aquifer system, and it just makes it sometimes a little bit more complicated for the interpretation. But I think after having done it for several times now, I think we've got a pretty good handle on that. The last challenge is that some of the wells that we used in the 2009 and 2014 and even 2019 versions of the maps no longer exist. There's development that's going on. I use this example all the time, but there was a series of wells in the Naples area, and back when the wells were installed, probably 35 years ago. It was installed on the right-of-way of a sleepy 2-lane road that became a 6-lane highway, and chatted with DOT for a little bit, and they basically said, get this out of here. So we did, and but thankfully we were able to find another location where we had site access, and we found some funds to replace it. But it's just an example of, you know, what we're trying to deal with. And so each map is a little bit different in terms of whether a well is no longer present, or I think I'm going to cover today, what you're going to see is there are some new wells that weren't in existence in some of these previous years that help us do a better interpretation of the interface position. This is a compilation of all of the different type of data that we are pulling together. This is one portion of the data from the Broward County area. I don't expect you to read that. I just want to let you know that this is the type of information. We've literally compiled water quality data, well construction data for hundreds upon hundreds of wells to develop the maps that I'm going to be presenting today. And then I do want to point out a couple of things. This is the legend for each one of the maps, and the red oval is pointing out that there are some new wells in 2024 that were not in existence in any of the previous maps. And that's an important thing, because sometimes when we didn't have data, and we do have data now, it looks like the interface has moved pretty far inland as a result of intrusion, and it's really not. Most likely, and I would say in almost all of the cases, if the interface has now been interpreted to be a little bit further inland than it was previously, it's because that well didn't exist, and it allows us to draw a better interface position than we could previously. So I just want to caution you that sometimes you're going to see the interface further inland than any of the previous years, and it looks like, oh, we've got some major intrusion that happened over the previous 5 years, and it's really not the case. It's simply we have a new data point that didn't exist before, and now we can draw a much a better interpretation of the interface position. And then the other thing to note is on each one of these maps we have the mapped position of the interface in all of the previous years that we've done the mapping. So black is 2009, green is 2014, orange is 2019, and then purple is 2024. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the South Florida Water Management District in terms of our coastal aquifers, and point out some of the more salient areas that I wanted to highlight. So today, the first off is in the water table aquifer on the lower west coast, and we see a couple of things. And in this particular case, we see that the purple line is a little bit further inland than in some of the previous maps, and then indicates that there is some inland saltwater movement, for example, in the Naples area. And there's a ways to look at this from the plan view, from the map view, which is one thing here. And then I also want to point out, I pulled a graphic of a particular well. And this is an example of a well where we have chlorides in milligrams per liter versus time from the late 1990s all the way till today. And the color scheme is green is less than 100, yellow is 100 to 250, orange is 250 to 1,000, and then red is greater than 1,000. And what you can see here is over time, we had some fluctuations in this particular well, but over the last few years from the 2019 version of the map to today, we saw an increase going from about 250 all the way up to almost 600. So that's an example of pointing out to you that saltwater intrusion is occurring, and it's easy to see not only in the plan view where the purple line is further inland, but also on this chloride versus time graph that really does illustrate the point that chloride values are increasing, and it's as a result of saltwater intrusion. And then I mentioned earlier, these red circles are just pointing out areas where some new wells, the red stars, again, allow us to do a better interpretation of the interface position. So again, in the water table aquifer and the lower west coast area, we pointed out the Naples area. We also have some inland movement in southwest Collier County. And then here's a great example of what I've been talking about previously. This red star is a new data point. The interface looks like it moved a tremendous amount of distance in 5 years. It's probably not the case. We have a new well. It was probably there in 2019 and even 2014 or something like that, but it allows us to draw a better refined interpretation of the interface position in the water table aquifer in the Collier County area. So next up, and a little bit further down from the water table aquifer, is the next one is the lower Tamiami aquifer. And in this particular case, we've seen some changes. The interface appears to have retreated toward the coast in the Naples area here. So it's interesting. The interface moved inland in the water table aquifer, and it looks like it retreated in the aquifer just below it, the lower Tamiami aquifer. And there's a couple of potential reasons why that could have happened. Reduced wellfield pumpage is first, and then a combination of taking people off their domestic wells for landscape irrigation and converting them to using reclaimed water. That's sort of a double whammy. You're providing recharge to the aquifer, but you're also removing the local withdrawal for irrigation from a lot of residential customers that aren't on public water supply. And that combination tends to raise groundwater elevations and therefore allows for the opportunity for the interface to retreat toward the coast. And that's exactly what happened here, where you see the purple line is closer to the coast compared to any of the previously mapping efforts that we've done from 2009 to present. There's a couple of areas where, once again, we have a new data point in this red circle here. And then I also want to mention the relic seawater that I brought up a few slides back. This is an example of the lower Tamiami aquifer further inland, where in previous mapping exercises we interpreted this lobe of saltwater existing within the lower Tamiami aquifer. That aquifer in that particular area is sort of low permeability. That aquifer never got flushed out from previous rises and falls of sea level. So that saltwater is kind of trapped there. And we interpreted the interface and the amount of connate water there to be larger previously, but we had a new data point here, and that showed that it was relatively fresh. So it looks like the connate water present in that area is it's still a significant amount, but it's a little bit less than what we had previously had interpreted. But finally, in terms of saltwater intrusion, it looks like the Bonita Springs area had a little bit of inland movement compared to what we had previously. And again, you can see a lot of the data points are on the yellow in the 100 to 250, and then most recently in 2024, we could say that there was an increase there. So we've interpreted that to be a little bit of inland movement of the saltwater front in the lower Tamiami aquifer in the Bonita Springs area. Okay, so that's those are the highlights for the West Coast. Now let's go to the East Coast. This is Broward County, again, March, April, May of 2024 of this year. And it's difficult to see on this screen, so I'm going to go, just like I did with some the Lower West Coast, pick out some highlighted areas to point out some interesting features that I think will show you what's going on. So the first one up is Deerfield Beach area, and you can see that in previous mapping efforts, the interface was interpreted to be further inland, and the purple line is 2024, and it looks like the interface has retreated toward the coast. The reason for that is the city has been de-emphasizing pumpage from its eastern well field and focusing more on its western well field, and indeed is moving forward and implementing using the Florida aquifer to supplement their water supply source from the Biscayne aquifer. So that kind of combination of reducing pumpage from the eastern well field, which is close to the saltwater sources of water, such as the intracoastal and saltwater canals, that, and then reducing that eastern pumpage and in combination increasing the pumpage out west. This is a great example of things that utilities can do to deal with saltwater intrusion, at least in the short term. And I think this illustrates that point very well. So just to the south of there is Pompano Beach. And once again, we see that in previous, again, the orange was 2019 and the purple is 2024. You could see that the interface has once again retreated towards the coast. Again, that's probably a combination of a few things. Pompano has a western well field, so I think they're pumping that western well field a little bit more than they had previously, reducing somewhat the pumpage from their eastern well field, but then also they have a very long-standing reclaimed water program. So in that particular case, probably the greatest part of that is reducing residential pumping for landscape irrigation and instead using reclaimed water to irrigate their lawns. And that combination, I think, is once again raising groundwater elevations, and it's allowing the interface to retreat toward the coast. So those are some of the good news stories. And I do want to point out, over the last couple of years, the Water Management District installed some wells, both of them in Broward County, to reflect, the level of concern we have for saltwater intrusion in Broward County. But this is one that we installed year before last, I believe. And there aren't a whole lot of monitor wells from where the interface was interpreted to be, and then all the way over to Pompano's western well field. We were able to find, we had access to a right-of-way, we installed a well, and as I mentioned earlier, in areas where we don't have access agreements, where they were installed a long time ago and we didn't have access agreements or in place, sometimes, we lose those wells. And in the wells that we're trying to install now, we're trying to make sure that if we're gonna spend the money to do it, that these wells are gonna be around for a long time. So this is actually a well that was located in our right-of-way, and so we're pretty confident that we'll be able to, this will be a long-standing monitoring well that we can use for interpretation purposes. The good news is, because the interface did retreat, that well, even though it's upwards of 300 feet deep, it is fresh. And you could see the well number is number 43, and the chloride value is 19, so that's super fresh, and that's really great news in that particular area. So Deerfield Pompano, things are looking good. The interface is retreated, and it's great to see. Not so good news. We have the Fort Lauderdale Peel-Dixie Wellfield area, and we can see that with the green is 2014 and the orange is 2019, there is some inland movement, especially in the Peel-Dixie area. I do want to point out a couple of things. This red star is a new data point that we didn't have previously, and you could see that the chloride value is over 2,600. And so we definitely interpret the interface to have actually moved past the well field. And that sounds kind of bad, and it kind of is, but there's some mitigating circumstances there. One is that the interface that the chloride value from this monitor well was taken at a depth of 280 feet, whereas the city's production wells are pumping from a depth of about 120 feet. So there's about 150 plus or minus feet of vertical separation between the saltwater, where the saltwater is right now, and where the city is pumping its wells, which they've been doing for decades. So it's an area of concern, but it's not an area of concern from an imminent perspective, because I believe that the interface probably has been in that area for a fair amount of time. But we do have data indicating that it is definitely continuing to encroach in that area. And I showed you the graphic of what saltwater intrusion looks like and what the saltwater interface looks like. It's sort of like a wedge. And as we continue to see intrusion there, that wedge will continue to move inland, and it will move upland, so or it will move upwards. So eventually that could be a real problem for the city, but right now it is not, and it hasn't been for a long time. And then also want to point out over here, once again, it looks like the interface moved quite a bit from 2019 to 2024. This is an example of where we were kind of conflicted with the fact that we have some data over here that is fresh, but those wells are really shallow. They're 50 or 100 feet, something like that. But we do know from the data over here and here that the interface, or that chloride values at depth, are very salty. So we reinterpreted the purple line to be a little bit further inland from what we had previously. Again, not as a result somewhat of newer data, but also because of just a better interpretation of the fact that saltwater is present at depth, but it is not, it's not at the production zone that the city uses for water supply. And then I also want to point out, well, I may probably do that in the
I
next
was going
slide.
to say that you now have the pointer if you want to.
Oh,
We
thank
were
you.
not able to see the areas.
I'm
that you
sorry,
were.
I
Yeah.
apologize for that. Okay. And then this is another well that we installed probably 2 years ago. It's fresh, it has a chloride value of 140, but you could see the interface position has moved inland here, and it's one that we're definitely going to be watching. And, Saltwater intrusion, it's not uniform. We've got areas where it's retreating, as I talked about earlier, in Deerfield and Pompano, and areas where it seems to be moving further inland in Lauderdale and South Broward County. But I just want to, again, point out, sometimes it's easy to see in map view, like over here, but you can also see what's going on in chloride versus time graphs from select wells, and you can see that in 2000, for example, this particular well was fresh, and it has steadily increased in chloride values, and the highest value ever recorded was the one that was just obtained, and it's 1600. So it definitely supports the conclusion that intrusion has moved, saltwater intrusion has occurred, and the interface has moved inland in that particular area. Conversely, not too far away, we have this well where it was relatively fresh, we had a lot of intrusion, and then it looks like it's gotten a little bit fresher since the 2019 sample. And you can see that one of the updates to the maps that we did this time was we have the 2024 value, which was 3,730 here, and we put the 2019 value here. So it was 4,570, it is now 3,730, so the interface has retreated a little bit in that particular area. Again, not too far away from an area where it's actually moving inland, so it's complicated, and there's a lot of different factors in terms of well field pumpage, rainfall recharge, and things like that that make this, it's certainly not uniform. And then I mentioned South Broward County. This is continued westward movement of the interface. Again, the green and black is 2009, 2014. The orange is 2019, and the purple is 2024. So in the South County area from Dania Beach all the way down to Hallandale Beach, down to the Broward-Miami-Dade border, it looks like there's continued inland movement of saltwater. Again, you can see this from a well that in the 1990s was super fresh. It started getting more saline, and we're continuing to see increases in chloride values. So for this particular well, number 118, the value was 5,500 in 2019, and now it's 7,250. So continued inland movement of saltwater in the South Broward County area. Next up is Palm Beach County. And here we are in the Jupiter area. And again, the red stars are new data points, and you can see the green and black are 2009, 2014, the orange is 2019, and then the purple is 2024. And I think this is a great example, once again, of we've interpreted the interface to be further inland than previously, but that's because we have these three wells that didn't exist prior to that. All of these canals here are saltwater canals, so it's really not a stretch to understand that that interface probably was there this whole time. These saltwater canals are sources of saltwater, as I mentioned earlier, and that has, because it's more dense, it's migrated down into the aquifer, and that's the reason why the interface is it was probably there this entire time. We just had no way of knowing because we didn't have wells at that point. So we think we have a refined and better interpretation of the interface position in that particular area. And then looks like the interface in this area has retreated once again toward the coast because the values are, I'm sorry, I take it back. Yeah, it looks like it's actually moved inland a little bit in that area from 374 all the way to 416 in that particular area. So moving south, Lake Worth Beach, Lantana area. Looks like we have some slight movement in the Lake Worth Beach area compared to 2019, not a whole lot. And it does look like there's some inland movement in the Lantana area. Again, not too much. And you could see, here's an example of a well that was 1715 in 2019, and now it's 2160. So a little bit of inland movement in the Lantana area. Okay, heading south, this is a similar story that we saw in the Fort Lauderdale for the Peel-Dixie well field. The chloride concentrations in this well are relatively stable. They're relatively high, but they're stable. We again wanted to emphasize the furthest inland extent of the interface, and some wells in this particular area in Boynton Beach, they're pretty saline. So I think this is another example like Fort Lauderdale's Peel-Dixie well field where the interface is at depth, it's moved inland, and it's underneath the production wells for the city of Boynton Beach, but because the production wells are much shallower than the monitor wells that we're looking at here, they haven't experienced any deleterious effects of saltwater intrusion that affect their well field, but it's present, and of course, they have a detailed monitoring program in place to make sure that they're not inducing saltwater into their wells. But again, this is a longer-term concern that we need to continue to track. And the next up is Delray Beach. We definitely show some movement of the interface. It looks like it retreated a little bit from 2009, 2014 to 2019, but it is back. So we do have some movement of the interface since 2019. And this USGS well PB 1707 is a great illustration of that. It used to be somewhat saline. It became fresher over time. And then in about 2019 or so, it was the freshest it had been for a while. But in a 2 or 3 year span, they'd had significant movement, and it seems to have leveled off over the last 2 or 3 years. But that's probably the most blatant example of intrusion happening over a very short period of time. I believe they had some issues where they needed to pump their eastern well field at a greater rate than they had normally done from water quality concern. And I think that might have caused some intrusion there, but it does look like it has stabilized. And hopefully in the 2029 version of the maps in the future, it might return back to something a little bit more reasonable. And then finally, in Martin St. Lucie County, there's a couple of areas like the Stewart Peninsula, Jensen Beach, South Martin Regional Utilities. Looked at all of those, and I don't have detailed slides of those because the bottom line is that the interface either moved very slightly inland or it actually retreated, which is really good news for the Stewart Peninsula, as a matter of fact. So having said all that, what are some of the conclusions? We did have some noticeable inland movement in South Broward County. I believe that's ongoing, and Delray Beach, I think that's kind of stabilized now. We do have some modest inland movement in Fort Lauderdale, Lantana, Naples, Southwest Collier County, and Bonita Springs in the lower Tamiami Aquifer. It appears that the interface has retreated toward the coast in Naples and the lower Tamiami Aquifer, Deerfield Beach, and Pompano. And I think we have a better delineation of where the interface is now as a result of some new wells, particularly in Jupiter, Fort Lauderdale, and Boynton Beach. The interface has advanced or retreated depending on a number of factors. Its location, proximity of wells to saltwater, the amount of wellfield pumpage and reclaimed water use, and then the retiring of domestic wells for landscape irrigation associated with that. Intrusion is occurring. It really does emphasize the importance of continued monitoring both laterally and vertically, and then wellfield management to make sure that we're not inadvertently causing additional saltwater intrusion. Additional localized monitoring may be required at select well fields to make sure that, by the permittees, to make sure that they're protecting their water supplies. And then ongoing monitoring and this mapping effort is really important to evaluate the effects of future sea level rise. So our next steps is looking at all these maps and working with local governments and permittees to identify other existing wells that exist that just didn't make it into our mapping effort because we're not aware of them. I think we did a good job of reaching out and trying to identify some existing wells from some of our local partners, and that made it into the maps, and so these are better products than probably the ones previously. Identify funding to facilitate well replacement as needed, again, because of development and inadvertent destruction, we lose wells on occasion, and we do want to have some funding in place to replace those as needed. And then identify the need and funding for new wells and data gaps or in areas of concern. I don't see a whole lot of that right now. I think there's some areas where we have needs for improvement, but not a whole lot. I think the well information that we have is pretty good. This particular website is where you can get the full version of the maps. They are big PDFs. And at the bottom of every one of the maps that covers the entire county is all of the metadata, all of that, that table I showed you that had all of the well name, the well depths, the screen interval, the open hole interval, the chloride values and things like that. All of that information that was used to generate the maps that are above it is on these giant maps that have all that data. And that was just uploaded today, so feel free to go and look in your area of particular interest. I only covered some of the highlights in some of the areas today. And there's more to look at if you want to and to get really into the detail. There's also on our GIS, external GIS page, there is a web map that goes into even greater detail. So those of you that are GIS converse and you want to pull even more detail about particular areas, you're welcome to do that from the web maps. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Pete. Excellent, excellent presentation. Any question?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just had one question. So I'm from the city of Boynton Beach, and obviously our area does seem to have a high amount of inland saltwater intrusion, and I know it seems to be stabilized, but what are some recommended measures that you would say would be good for long-term ways to address this to maybe reduce our impacts?
Well, I mean, I do know that you do have access to a western well field, and anything that you can do to maximize pumpage from the western well field as opposed to the eastern would be of benefit. And then monitoring and, you know, and monitoring, and then finally, you know, when we have dry conditions, you know, definitely greater emphasis on your western well field. That will have less of a tendency of having the eastern well field pull that salt water inland. And I know it's challenging because I know the water quality, and this is true not just for Boynton Beach, but, you know, all of the utilities, the water quality for production wells that are located along the ridge is better than it is on the west. The western has higher color content. So, you know, each utility struggles with the fact that they are trying to prevent saltwater intrusion, but they want to deliver the best water quality to their customers. So completely understand that, and I know it's a delicate balancing act, but, you know, definitely for the, you know, in the dry season, if you could, you know, take off the accelerator on the eastern wells and focus a little bit more on the western wells, I think that would help. And then, you know, again, continued monitoring. And then as you see, you know, I know you collect water quality samples probably on a daily basis for chlorides and other things from individual wells. I think, you know, by tracking that data, you can see which particular individual wells might be seeing increases in chlorides, and maybe de-emphasize those individual wells, and then you could pump probably other wells that are not seeing that chloride increase. And that's all, you know, my guess is that, you know, you all are doing that, and utilities are doing that already, but you know, since you asked the question, that's what you can do.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, please sit here, join us at the table.
I think I can project. I'm kind of just wondering.
We do have online participants that will not be able to hear you, so can you get a mic, just so, yeah, thank you. Otherwise, the online cannot listen. Yeah, feel free to sit here with us.
Have there been any incidents with saltwater intrusion into any of the city's plants?
Any city? Or are you
Sure,
talking about Boynton Beach or?
Any city.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we definitely have had saltwater intrusion. I mentioned the South County area, the Dania Beach, Hallandale Beach. Saltwater intrusion has occurred there, and there are wells that are no longer operated by both of those utilities as a result of saltwater intrusion.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I'm from Dania Beach, and
Oh.
we are
Okay.
initiating some new wells. So
Great,
that
great.
explains, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then you know better than I do. But yeah, there are wells in that particular area. And again, South Broward seems to be, and I'll share this, you know, a lot of it has to do with topographic elevations. You know, your proximity to your saltwater sources, and then your topographic elevations. That portion of the county has lower elevations than North County, so it's not surprising that Deerfield and Pompano elevations are a little bit higher, so they have more freshwater head to work with. You don't have that as much in South Broward County and Miami-Dade County, so you're by definition more susceptible to saltwater intrusion, and that's probably why some of the wells in Dania Beach and Hallandale Beach have experienced saltwater intrusion, and that they're no longer functional. And so it is, it's not a theoretical discussion. We've documented examples of saltwater intrusion rendering production wells no longer useful. And then what has happened in the past is the cities have come in to have wells permitted probably further west, further away from the saltwater source, and that's something that you can do, but you're limited by that, by the size of your municipal boundaries. And then if you go too far west, you start impacting wetlands in the Everglades system. So it's a constrained system, and we certainly recognize that. Sure.
Just to add something, we have our metrics hub, so all those maps are also going to be uploaded in our metrics hub that we are monitoring all types of data. This is definitely one of the key maps that we have there in data. So I don't have a timeline here, but we'll have this updated in the metrics hub soon. And in the metrics hub, you're going to there is a count that was made 3 years ago, 26, I think it's 26 or 27, the number of well fields that we counted so far that were relocated to the east, potentially as a result of saltwater intrusion and other issues. But 27 is the total in the South Florida region.
So one last thing, Carolina mentioned the modeling thing, and that's another major activity that's happening in my group. And so we believe we'll be fully completed with our calibration of our density-dependent model that covers Indian River County all the way down to the Keys. We believe we'll be completed with the calibration, first quarter of next year, and then we'll be doing a couple of simulations to support the LEC water supply plan, looking at projections out to 2045, the 20-year planning horizon. And then subsequent to that, we'll be doing some simulations that Carolina mentioned out to 2075. And we really think, with the mapping effort now, we've got a really good snapshot of some of the pinch points, the areas of concern. And I think when we do this 20-year modeling effort to support the Lower East Coast water supply plan, and then the water supply vulnerability assessment out to 2075, the 50-year look ahead, I think we're really going to be able to nail down the areas of concern and then share that information with you all, and then figure out what we need to do to address those potential vulnerabilities. So look forward to having members of my team present the results of the modeling effort, and knock wood, it would be happening in 2025.
You have all the agendas reserved for you, Peter. We are really also looking forward to this. We're going to have a lot of good tools that we can use here with the model, so very important.
Thank you.
I have one quick question, if I may.
Oh, sure.
I know that there are developments in the east that use deep well injection of stormwater, and I've heard speculation that could be a difference maker for saltwater intrusion. Is that really the case, or is it just wishful thinking that we can improve the saltwater intrusion situation by injecting stormwater for isolated properties up and down the coast?
Okay,
Sir, can you please state your name for the record?
Sure. James Poole. I'm working with the Florida Department of Transportation.
You mentioned deep well injection. I'm not sure are you referring to down to 3,000 feet into the boulder zone, or are you talking about into the Biscayne aquifer? Because
More like the aquifer.
yeah, because injecting into the boulder zone would do nothing to affect saltwater intrusion. In fact, it might even make it worse, because now you're taking that stormwater and you're removing it from the system by putting it 3,000 feet down. There are challenges in terms of permitting of stormwater recharge into a freshwater aquifer. DEP is in charge of dealing with permitting associated with that. But I know those types of projects have been looked at previously, literally, for over the last 3 decades, and I'm not aware of any that have actually been implemented. So maybe there's more going on in terms of looking at the water quality impacts of stormwater injection into the superficial aquifer system, but I'm not aware of active projects where they're looking at that right now.
Okay.
I know we're beginning to simulate those and test as part of the level of service as one of the adaptation strategies. We don't have any conclusions yet. It's kind of early, but some of the feasibility in terms of cost is something that was flagged early on. And more recently, we were just understanding like areas and where it really works. There was a presentation done here by the City of Hollywood, I think 2 forums ago, that they were also looking at that as a potential measure. And they were looking for areas in the city where they could do that too. So anyway, there is definitely some interest and research advancing in this area, and maybe
Okay.
this is something we need to look further in.
I have a follow-up comment on that. The other part that's really critical is the location. So if you think about, we just mapped the interface position. If you put those stormwater recharge areas east of the interface, you'll actually push the interface westward. So it really, the area that you could do it has to be, west of the interface. That would be increasing the freshwater head and would tend to push the interface. If it's to the east, you could actually make things worse. So that's why it's challenging from a location perspective. Do you have the land? Where is it going to be located? What is the volume? And then finally, most importantly, which the reason I think some of these projects have not, that were conceptualized that were never built, is because of water quality issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Pete. Dr. Moran, we're going to take things out of order from the agenda. We'll hear now from the Corps and Matt Morrison from the district on the studies.
Thank you, Yvette. Thanks for the update. So, yes, do we want to start, team? Thank you.
I'll throw mine up first, and then I'll turn it over to him pretty quick. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Tim Geisen. I'm the Resilient Senior Project Manager with the Jacksonville District at the Corps of Engineers. Those of you who have participated before have heard me do kind of these updates. So we'll kind of focus on several of our flood resiliency projects, and I'm going to end with something a little bit different that I don't have a slide for, but I'm going to talk a little bit about operations. So to start out, just want to remind everybody, I think when we talked at the last forum, we had introduced this idea of an integrated path forward on our CNSF flood resilience efforts that started with the Section 216 in Broward and Dade counties. And we introduced an integrated path forward using different authorities to address the same study area, but smaller scopes for each of those. We'll kind of talk about those today, particularly the Planning Reach A in the Broward County basins and Planning Reach C, the Miami River basins. So real quick on this remaining scope for the Section 216, which is, as we move forward, will be focused on what was called Reach C, the Miami River, C6 basin in particular. When we talked last time, we were in the process of working through our request for an exemption to the WRDA policy, which requires 3 years, $3 million for our planning studies. And we're looking for an exemption from those requirements to go beyond $3 million and beyond 3 years. In fact, we're looking at a scope that's captured in what we call our vertical team alignment memorandum, which is basically just the mechanism that we use to request an exemption. Looking at a study that would take us out to 2029 for a chief's report and at a cost of about $14 million. So we're still working through that process. That vertical team alignment memorandum, or VTAM, has been endorsed by our regional headquarters in Atlanta and sent up to our headquarters in Washington for review. So it's still under review in DC. And then once that is complete, that'll be sent over to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works for approval of that exemption. So as we work through that process, we're being very frugal with the remaining funds that we have. So our technical efforts have been pretty limited over the past few months as we worked on that VTAM and working through that process. But we have made some additional progress, particularly in our economics modeling, as that team has been working through some challenges with implementation of the FDA model on a very large scale, something that's a bit unprecedented around the country and the Corps. So again, in Florida, we tend to blaze trails on a lot of these projects, so that's no different on this flood resiliency effort. So more to come on that. We plan, once we have approval of the VTAM and have access to some additional funds, to come back out to public and the PDT and talk a little bit about the technical results from our existing Future Without project efforts, and then work on preliminary alternatives that we're trying to get to by the end of this fiscal year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Morrison to talk to you about the Section 203 effort.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, good morning, everyone. Matt Morrison with the South Florida Water Management District. All right, for starters, I'm sure you all heard the number 203 in the introductory remarks from Mr. Brooks. You heard 203 from Carolina and her resiliency update. And if you didn't notice, there was a 203 in Reach A in that integrated path forward that Tim Geisen just presented. So I'm going to start today really trying to help everybody better understand what the 203 is, and right off the bat, identify the project purpose under this Section 203 effort. So what we're trying to achieve during this feasibility study, this planning effort that will culminate with a report and environmental impact statement, is to really identify the most effective and feasible plan to reduce flood risk in areas of Broward County. Yep, that's the focus. Broward County, Reach A, taking all the information that's been gained over the last couple of years in the 216 work, and ultimately develop a report and an environmental impact statement for those Broward basins. This study will ultimately be focusing on the primary canals and coastal water structures in Broward County that are part of the Central and Southern Florida project. So we've got a very narrow scope. We're focus-minded, and under the 203 process, that allows us to take a look at previous authorizations that occurred with the Central and South Florida project and ultimately do modifications that we feel might be prudent or necessary to that particular infrastructure. Under this Section 203, the South Florida Water Management District is considered the non-federal sponsor, but I think it's really important for us to recognize our partners with FDEP and Broward County that are also helping us by bringing funding support to this effort. One of the big items that have kind of made our job a little bit easier from the start is taking a look at all of the work that had been done in the 216 study and that basically came out of the modeling effort, all the discussions, all the stakeholder input in Reach A, which is specific to Broward County, and bringing that information forward into this more detailed study that we're now embarking on. So I just want everyone to know that we're really leveraging a lot of great work that was done previously in the 216, and we're really going to narrow the focus and develop this feasibility study that will culminate with about a 30% design of recommended infrastructure in that primary system that's part of the Central and Southern Florida project. The project management, all the modeling, and all the evaluations for this project will be done and completed by the South Florida Water Management District. We've got a great team that's working on this internally that goes across a broad spectrum of disciplines. In addition to that, we are hiring some consulting services through a plethora of consulting firms to help us provide technical assistance, some policy guidance, and additional modeling and engineering support and the like. So between the staff that's assigned to this project here at Water Management District and our contractual services, we have a very large and a very great team, for lack of better words, to basically move forward and implement this planning study. I can't leave out the Jacksonville District. We work in partnership with them under many arenas, and in this particular project, we are working with them so they can provide us technical and federal assistance in basically managing the Section 203 process as the Water Management District moves forward and plans this particular study and report. And then one of the big things that we really need to recognize is that, this integrated path forward that Tim briefly talked about, and us focusing on Reach A, the Broward basins, we really want to try and expedite the federal authorization for our ultimate recommendations. So this project has a very aggressive schedule, and I think it needs to be acknowledged and recognize that we're targeting an authorization in the Water Resource Development Act of 2026. All right, so just quickly, the study area. Again, we're leveraging everything that was conducted in the 216 study, and we're basically taking the REACH A elements from the 216 and importing them directly into the Section 203 project. So REACH A is the study area for the Section 203. REACH A contains approximately 420 square miles of area. And what I did on this particular slide was just put some information in the form of a topographic map to give everybody a general sense of the relatively flat landscape in Broward County in our planning area, and recognize that, you know, it's really only slightly above sea level if you really think about it. And the majority of the infrastructure that's in the Central and Southern Florida project, which is comprised of canals and coastal structures, is predominantly a gravity-driven structure, where when we get rain, water comes to the primary canals, and then we shunt and remove that water from the basins to the Atlantic coast. And there's not a lot of head to actually move that water to the East Coast due to the fact that the landscape is relatively flat. So this graphic here basically shows how we've broken up the REACH A planning area into a couple different geographic regions. We recognize that there are several managed watersheds in the study area. Those managed watersheds are identified in the brown color there. In addition to that, we have what we call the primary canals and rivers. They may be a little bit difficult to see on the graphic, but there's a network of canals and rivers that are part of the original Central and Southern Florida project that basically move water from the area identified in brown through those little red dots on the map, which are our coastal water control structures. And then you have the area in blue further to the east along the coast, which are considered the non-managed watersheds that are downstream of the coastal structures that manage water resources upstream in those brown basins. I've got a table there. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it basically lists out the 8 different watershed basins that we're going to be looking at and making recommendations for. Within those basins, there are 8 primary canal or river networks, and then associated with those, there is another handful of coastal water control structures that are listed there that we're going to be taking a hard look at in and improving as part of this study. So again, you know, taking what we can from all the hard work that was done in the 216 study and moving it into the 203 study, some of the first things that you really do from a planning perspective is identify some of your problems, your project opportunities. You want to take a look at your project goals, your project objectives, and you need to identify what kind of constraints you might ultimately be working with during your planning effort. So without getting into a lot of details on this, we're basically importing and leveraging this information from the 216 study. And when it comes to problems, I think we all recognize that changing climatic conditions have demonstrated an immediate need to address, you know, flood and coastal storm risk management. And again, this is specific to Broward County. We also recognize that, you know, when I talk about the Central and Southern Florida project, those canals and those coastal structures, in many cases, are 70 years old. And we all know how much South Florida and Broward County has changed in the last 70 years. That infrastructure was designed for what was here in South Florida, you know, 70 years ago, and there's been a lot of changes. And those changes that have occurred, increased runoff, climate change, sea level rise, high tides, has really put a stress on the infrastructure in Broward County in some of these highly urbanized areas. And we recognize that there is flooding that exists today, And we recognize that as climatic conditions change into the future, that flooding may get worse. Those flood events cause economic damages. And from a problem standpoint, we want to marry up the goals, the objectives, and the opportunities to help mitigate these types of problems that have been identified for this project. So here's just a quick list of some of the opportunities, the goals and objectives. Obviously, we want to provide continued flood risk management to reduce the most immediate flooding risks in vulnerable areas associated with those primary canals and water control structures of the Central and South Florida project. One of the reasons that we're embarking on a 203 study is related to that second bullet under draft opportunities, and that is so we can expeditiously move forward, seek authorization, and modify the system in areas that are highly vulnerable to reduce some of the risks. And in doing that, obviously, that provides better level of service for flood control under these existing conditions that we're experiencing today, as well as planning and setting us up for anticipated future conditions associated with climate change. Goals and objectives, again, importing a lot of that information from the hard work that was done in the 216 effort. We're really looking at evaluating and recommending flood risk management measures and adaptation strategies to deal with current flooding, but more importantly, to establish resiliency for the Broward County communities that are served by the primary canal network. And then, last but not least, there are constraints in these types of studies, and they're important to recognize. I've put a couple of them out there. Under this authorization, we are focusing specifically on the Central and Southern Florida project, so the study itself is going to be limited to the primary canals and the coastal water structures that are associated with the Central and Southern Florida project. Improvements to that system will free up capacity, improve carrying capacity for the secondary and tertiary systems to deliver water to that primary system and get that water off the landscape. And then no matter what recommendations we make at the end of the day, we cannot compromise the existing level of service for flood protection. And that last bullet basically says, go out there and do great things to improve everything, but bottom line, make sure that you don't diminish or reduce any of the existing flood risk management that we're experiencing today. So I talked about trying to target a WRDA 26 for authorization. This is the schedule. I will note that it's very aggressive, but we're going to get there, and we're going to work hard to get there. We've actually initiated this project with a project kickoff meeting back on October 24th down in Broward County, which was really our first public meeting and public engagement for public input. Over the month of November, we've been aggressively collecting data for the project, things like going out and getting geotechnical work done where we think we might need some infrastructure improvements, doing environmental assessments that are required, all a part of either the design aspects or the National Environmental Policy Act information that's required. And then here we are today in the December timeframe, again, seeking public input in this particular forum on December 4th. And just as important, we have an upcoming scoping meeting, public scoping meeting that's required by NEPA on December 10th, and I'll share a little more information on that. And then you can see as we turn the books on this calendar year and move into 2025, things are going to move very quickly. We're going to be modeling alternatives. We're going to be doing cost-benefit analysis. We'll identify a final array of alternatives, and then ultimately identify what we think is a recommended plan for Broward County for these primary canals and coastal water control structures in April. So, that's just around the corner here, another 5 months. And then come August, we will actually issue and publish in the Federal Register, with assistance from the Army Corps of Engineers, a draft integrated feasibility study in EIS for publication and public input. And then basically we take all that public input that we've received, we go through a series of technical reviews, we complete the 30% design, and then come the next year, early in January 26, we publish that final integrated EIS for public engagement, public comment. We finalize the report, and then we submit it off to the Assistant Secretary of the Army in March of 2026, so we can get that document and the necessary information to the congressional committees in time to meet and hopefully get an authorization in 2026 under WRDA for this particular project. I did mention the scoping meetings. These are really important, and there's 2 of them here I just want to highlight. This really kind of kicks off the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act process for the project, and we have 2 meetings that are going to be back-to-back on December 10th, one from 2 to 4 and one from 6 to 8. And Broward County has been kind enough to allow us to conduct these meetings at their government center down in Fort Lauderdale. I will let you know that in that 2-hour block for both of those back-to-back meetings, the first 30 minutes, we're going to be just kind of, hosting a get-together and a meet and greet, and we'll have some great maps and have the ability to, talk to some folks about the project. And then the last hour and a half of each of those meetings will really get into the requirements of NEPA, which include talking about NEPA and then sharing all the information that we have to date on the project to really formally initiate the public scoping process that the Army Corps will help us manage. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion. Again, this is, another public meeting, and if there are comments that folks had on the project, the 203 process, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Any questions?
Just a quick question on the public scoping meetings. They're 2 in the same day, so they're just both the same.
Same
meeting. If
meetings?
you attend one, you don't need to attend
Yes.
the other. Thank you.
Just the opportunity for people that cannot attend during the day to go in the evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Great, excellent. So thank you, everyone, up to here. We will have a 10-minute break, just to stretch the leg. We're going to be back at 11. So
Carolina, he has a few more slides.
I really
okay.
messed
I mean, I can
here.
sit.
I missed that. No, Tim, of course. I was looking at here, and I'm like, where did Tim go? He wouldn't disappear. I know. Okay, Tim.
All right. And just for those public meetings, I don't think Matt mentioned, there's also a virtual option for those. So it's in person and virtual. So if you can't drive out there, join online. Comments count just the same, no matter whether they're delivered there in person or online or written. So participation is really key. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the other flood risk management effort that we're going to be kicking off, and this is in the Upper Kissimmee Basin for Shingle Creek. We're working through what's called a feasibility cost share agreement with Osceola County. They're our non-federal sponsor for this particular effort. Although there will be quite a bit of involvement, I think, from the Water Management District on that one as well, as our non-federal sponsor for CNSF. We are looking to execute that agreement in January and really kick off that study in February. So I think we're beginning at the next forum, we'll have initiated that effort, and I'll have some more to talk about related to this particular effort. But we're looking to start scoping, I think, mid to late February of 2025. We'll have some public meetings held up in Osceola County in the March timeframe. So if you are interested in participating in that, we'll have more information available later. But this one, again, is focused on flood risk management within the Shingle Creek area, a very focused effort that will tie into the central and southern Florida system in Lake Toho in the S61 structure, which I noticed Carolina had on one of her slides. There's some potential efforts that the district's undertaking related to that structure as well. So there's a lot of interaction between what the district is doing in the FPLOS effort, as well as some efforts that Osceola County has ongoing that we'll be able to build on in the Shingle Creek effort, and hopefully get some federal authorizations for some flood risk management projects in that area. All right. Then the last thing, and I don't have a slide for this. Oh, good. You did take out that slide about the hiring. You weren't joking.
I'm
But I
not.
want to talk a little bit about operations. We don't necessarily think of operations as a resilience effort, but operations really tie together all of the infrastructure, those canals and structures, which are part of specifically a resilience effort for flood risk management or water supply or environmental restoration. But operations are really the kind of key thing that ties everything together and gives us an opportunity as after we have something constructed to really look at resilience of the system on a local and larger scale. So I wanted to highlight an effort that we've undertaken with the Water Management District on CNSF water management and the way we're conducting our interactions with other agencies and the public in both our near-term and longer-term operations. So yesterday we held our first seasonal assessment meeting, which covered the entire CNSF system from Orlando down to Florida Bay, and really got a lot of good input interactions with our federal partners, state partners, and our tribal partners yesterday morning. And then in the afternoon, we held another meeting with local government and the public to get feedback on dry season operations. So kind of what we're looking at doing over the next 6 months throughout the entire system. Building on that, we also started having bi-weekly meetings. 1 week focused on the northern part of the system, from Orlando down to the water conservation areas, and then the next week a meeting focused on the southern part of the system, the conservation areas south, including the lower East Coast. So I do want to invite everybody to participate in those meetings, because that interaction, especially for those of you on the local level, can give us kind of real time what's going on locally and how can we adjust operations to really build resilience, not only from a flood risk management perspective, but from an environmental perspective and water supply. So that feedback is really important at the biweekly interactions as well. So if you're not already receiving invites to those meetings and you would like to participate, I know a lot of our local governments haven't historically participated in kind of the regional operations, but that feedback is really something we want to try to build as we move forward in our operational planning process. So feel free to get in touch with me and I'll get you added to the meeting invites. We look forward to building our operational planning effort as well as our infrastructure planning efforts. And with that, now I'm done.
Thank you, and apologies again, team.
Yeah.
I knew we were going to talk about Shingle Creek, and I was thinking, why you didn't include it in the first round? We had an excellent meeting together about last week, 2 weeks ago, again, to leverage the models that are being developed in the region. The level of service team presented on the model that we did for the Proximi. We had the counties, so they have watershed master plans undergoing there too. Very significant effort then from the local perspective. So there is definitely a ton of model and studies done for this study that would certainly facilitate the Shingle Creek effort as well. So excited, yes. Okay, now we can go for a break, and maybe we come back at 11:10 then. Thank you.
And I'm going to do a mic check with you.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Great.
We're going to get started pretty soon. You
Okay.
could take your seats, please. If you could please take your seats so we can get started.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Let's restart with the second part of the meeting. I hope the online folks are also here. Thank you, Anne, for the flexibility here as well to move to after the break. I think you work really well. So, Anne, thank you very much for joining us today. This invitation to Anne was done last minute. We actually had two impacts on the agenda for this forum as originally planned. Those were a result of the hurricane impact. So SHNAP, the Coastal and National Heartland, were going to come and present to us on the vulnerability assessments they are doing there. But I mean, all the area has been impacted by the hurricane, and they asked us to postpone for March. So then we invited Ann to come here and fill the space that the Coastal and Heartland could not present. So thank you very much, Anne, for accepting this invitation kind of at the last minute. But the good news is she is doing an incredible job and making so much progress on the compound flooding arena, which is something that we have high interest right now. So I'm really excited to hear what she's going to be sharing with us. And again, thank you very much, Anne, for coming. It's great to hear from you. I'm sure we're going to see each other in person soon, but thank you for coming and presenting to us.
Thank you for having me. Is everyone able to see my slides okay?
Yes, and we can hear
Okay,
you
great.
really well.
Perfect. All right. Well, whoever's clicking, I'll just let you know and to move to the next slide. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to be there in person with you all, but I'm really glad I have the opportunity to share what we've been working on up here in Jacksonville. We've been really trying to dig into the concept of compound flooding, and we have a really fantastic team of consultants that are advising us and building a model for us. It's led by the Water Institute out of Louisiana, formerly the Water Institute of the Gulf. Some of you may be familiar with their work. We have support from Deltaris in the Netherlands on this project. Locally, we're getting engineering support from Hafen Associates, and then we have academic partners who are weighing in as well. Some folks from University of Central Florida and from Princeton. And really the hope with this was to not only address Jacksonville's challenges with compound flooding, but hopefully do so in a way that can be an asset to other parts of Florida. So I'm really glad that we're getting a chance to share this with you today. And I'll be very curious to see kind of if pieces of this seem feasible in South Florida. I'll also just caveat up front, I am not an engineer or a hydrologist, so I'm not the details person on how the model is built, but I will do my best, and I can absolutely connect anyone in the room with our technical team if they have more detailed questions. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this concept, but we've been using this graphic a lot locally to get residents to understand that flooding is an impact. It's something they can see and they can feel, but it can have many different root causes. It could be a coastal event. It can be, a high persistent high wind event. a hurricane or another wind event that produces surge, or it could be sunny day high tide flooding. And then on the inland side of things, we're seeing rainfall induced flooding in many of Jacksonville's tributaries. If you haven't been to Jacksonville or aren't familiar with the area, Jacksonville has over 1,500 linear miles of shoreline. We have the Atlantic beach, and then we have where the St. Johns River meets the ocean, and there are 59 major tributaries off of the St. Johns River within the city of Jacksonville. So it's a really dispersed set of flood risks, and we haven't had the tools we needed to address that. Next slide. Pretty much every flooding impact event that the city of Jacksonville sees is a combined event. Irma was kind of the storm of record for Jacksonville, and was absolutely a confluence of multiple types of flooding happening simultaneously. And it's something we consistently see, even without a named storm event. The confluence of king tides and heavy rainfall events have started to cause issues. So it felt urgent for us to get our hands around it. Next slide. This was a data gap that was identified in the city's resilience strategy. Next slide. We also, fluvial flooding was another data gap that we identified. We have some FEMA data that helps us understand, you know, our tributary and our coastal flood risk, but we really didn't have a sense of where there's just an upland dip in a basin, and where that water might start ponding and pooling and causing disruptions. And so this is something that we also felt a compound flood model would be able to help us address. Next slide. I'm going to share a couple of aspects of this project, how we're building this model, some real-time forecasting system that we're working on, and the ways that this is going to help with implementation. I'm going to skip talking about our data and model catalog, but if folks are interested, again, I can connect you to our technical team. The long and the short of it is that we want to make sure that the data that we are developing is easy for you know, the private sector who works with the city to use, and also really leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for other communities who want to develop a tool similar to this. So all of this is really open data, and the system that we're developing is not proprietary. We wanted it to be a basis for others. So with that, if you head to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how we've built our model. Next slide. This is where, again, I'm going to do my best to give you the technical elements, but essentially we're using a HECRAS 2D model, and where the city came from was we really needed to understand how rain and wind and coastal events and coastal flooding are happening concurrently. And we've had a way to look at storm surge, we've had a way to look at rainfall, but combining those and combining those with a level of accuracy beyond just looking at, you know, fluvial flow with a tidal boundary. We haven't been able to get to the real complexity we see. And for those who maybe in the room aren't the technical folks, who are more like me, I think it's actually very intuitive, and we're finding that our residents are starting to really understand compound flooding, because it's logical that it would matter if a hurricane is hitting at low tide versus high tide. Our residents get that. If it's rain for a week in Central Florida and the St. Johns River is already higher, and then we have a king tide, or then we have a storm surge event, people understand that that's going to lead to more flood extent. What we haven't had is really the data to help us understand where that's going to happen and how we can effectively plan our infrastructure around that complexity. Next slide. So the model, the HECRAS model has a really large starting area. We're looking at you know, a large swath of Northeast Florida, the entire lower St. Johns River watershed, and some other nearby watersheds that have implications for the water levels in the St. Johns River. And if you'll go to the next slide, we also have you know, we have two different resolutions that we're seeing within our model. So we do have this larger Northeast Florida watershed basin that has a lower resolution, less detailed resolution mesh, and then the more detailed resolution is within the boundary of Duval County. the raster cell size within Duval County is 3 meters by 3 meters. So we're getting really refined data on exactly where we're likely to see impacts. Next slide. This is just a little zoom in on the San Marco area of Jacksonville, if anyone in the audience is familiar with that neighborhood, to give you a better sense of just how granular this is, and really looking at kind of the digital elevation of each neighborhood at a very detailed level. Next slide. This is a screen grab from an early output of our model. The area kind of within those red lines, that's where we have had mapped understandings of flood risk for the neighborhood of Springfield. But this is an area that's dealing with a lot of chronic flooding from rainfall, and we haven't had a way of capturing that. So the area within that yellow circle, it's really exciting to now be able to see it. And residents in Springfield have felt, just kind of from our early sharing of the model findings, have felt really seen and really validated that there is now a map that shows that the areas that they're seeing standing water on roads is finally captured, because our previous coastal models just didn't get down to that level. But really, fluvial flooding is often what has a major disruption on a chronic basis in people's lives, their ability to get to and from different areas. And if you live on a street that's dealing with chronic flooding, there's that the frequency of those pluvial events is much higher than the worst case scenario storm surge event. So this was really exciting for us to be able to see both of these elements captured. Next slide. This is a video, so whoever is controlling the slides, if you're able to hit play at the bottom, hopefully it'll work. But this is a video of the model running Irma, which again is our compound flood storm of record. The video is showing you over 3 days where the flooding extent was felt in Irma. You'll see it kind of ebbs and flows with the tidal cycle, but you'll also notice that flooding really gets trapped inland. And you'd think that the worst flooding would be closer to the mouth of the river. And it is at the beginning, but then as it gets back into the tributaries and that fluvial system is starting to meet the coastal system, we're seeing really high flood extents in some of those tributary neighborhoods. And that really mirrors what folks saw on the ground. So again, this was developed as part of the model validation. We really looked at a lot of our past storms to make sure things were lining up. If you go to the next slide, this gives you a sense of where there were recorded water levels from USGS and some NOAA gauges that show you the recorded flood levels from Irma, and then our modeled the results of our model. And you're seeing that it's lining up with a lot of accuracy. So this was one of the first indicators we got back from the model development team, and everyone was really excited to see that that this lined up. Next slide. This is the piece that I am most excited about and interested about. When we brought on the Water Institute to do this project for us, one of the kind of the big questions for me is, how are we going to use this in real time? And I think for a city like Jacksonville, where there is such complexity in how these different flood inputs can line up and what that impact is on the flood extent, felt really important to me that we not distill this down to just simply one map, but that we have a way of looking at a whole range of flood scenarios. And so the team at the Water Institute actually got a National Science Foundation grant, and they're going to be using some supercomputers out of the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center to run us 10,000 probabilistic models, ranging from best case scenario to worst case scenario, and plotted on a probabilistic curve, so that we'll also have a sense of what is most likely to occur, in addition to kind of what are the extremes. And that will all be visualized and presented in a way similar to what you're seeing here in a heat style map. We are about halfway through our modeling effort. The model is built. As you can see, there are these outputs that we have, but that full probabilistic curve is still being worked on, and those 10,000 runs still need to happen. But we asked them to run 100 events, and they took 20 past combined flood events, compound flood events, and then toggled different levels of sea level rise and rainfall acceleration, and led to just an initial set of 100 to just see how the model worked, and to give us a sense of what these final results will look like when they're in a heat style map. And so what this will allow us to do from a decision-making perspective is to start talking about where we have really high probabilities of risk, and instead moving away from talking about flooding and talking about flood risk as a binary, where you're either in the FEMA floodplain or you're out of the FEMA floodplain, and instead acknowledging that anywhere you are in Jacksonville will carry some possibility of flood risk, but the extent of that and how concerned you should be about that, or how concerned the city needs to be in our infrastructure planning, will vary depending on how frequently that's likely to occur and how severe that flooding is. And so this is, I think, a really interesting way that the final findings of our study are going to be presented, and some of the ways that we're hoping to be able to use it. Next slide. So the other piece of this effort that's been really exciting is having a real-time flood forecast system. So if you'll go to the next slide, the images I just shared from you are from our HACRAS 2D model. There's a second model that's been built during this effort, using a model called Sphinx that was developed by Deltaris. It's also a two-dimensional model. It covers the same area, but at a slightly different resolution, and it's able to be run very quickly. And so that Sphinx model has also run Irma, and has the same. We've done the same validation exercises on that, and it's also lining up like what you saw with our HECRAS model. But what the Sphinx model is able to do is run a software called Flood ID, and Flood ID was developed by the Water Institute, and it automatically scrubs forecast data from the National Weather Service and NOAA, and plugs it into the Sphinx model as the model inputs for tidal elevation at the time of the storm that the storm would be hitting, expected rainfall volume over time, wind speed, wind direction, and plugs those in as model inputs, and then cranks out a flood map in real time. So about an hour after NOAA puts out their hurricane advisories, we have a physical map of what that could look like for the city of Jacksonville. Now, the Flood ID platform for Jacksonville is still being finalized, but I have a couple of early outputs from recent storms. So if you'll go to the next slide, I can give you just a little flavor for what this looks like. This was during Hurricane Milton, I believe. And it's looking at, this was National Hurricane Center Advisory 15, and looking at where we would see compound flooding within the St. Johns River watershed. Now, this is water level, so you'll notice that some of the inland areas are darker because it's going off of elevation above sea level. So it's not the depth of the standing water. So this was an issue that we were like, well, this isn't helpful for decision makers. They're going to think there's a worse problem with the red. So again, we're halfway through this process, and so we're still refining things. But if you go to the next slide, this does show peak water depth, and that is from grade and above. So we have a sense of where we were going to see tributaries that were most impacted and neighborhoods that were most impacted. If you'll go to the next slide, we can also see through, we can overlay the search and rescue grid that our EOC uses and the National Structure Inventory, and we were able to see where are there clusters of structures that are likely to see flood impacts, or that have the potential of seeing flood impacts. And so again, this was just in a beta version for Hurricane Milton, but we're having conversations with our EOC about how this will help them stage resources in the days and hours before a storm hits, and also know what areas might need to be checked on first. This can also help us with tiering evacuations, because again, we're not looking at a cone approaching Jacksonville in the same way that you do when you go to the National Hurricane Center's website. We're seeing what could that cone mean on the ground. If you'll go to the next slide, this was the change that we saw in rainfall from advisory 14 to 15. And if you'll remember with Milton, it tracked south So St. Augustine got a lot more rainfall and a lot more impacts than we did. I believe these images are showing that rainfall volume. And between advisory 14 to 15, we could see what that would look like in terms of rainfall volume. And that was something that our EOC had, and that helped them, understand how those impacts would be felt on the ground, and I think breathe a little bit easier knowing that we were not going to be getting the worst impacts. Now, for me, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I know Jessica Beach, the CRO of St. Augustine. I want her to have this information too. And so that's also part of why I'm sharing this, is I think there's some really interesting ways that compound data can be used in real-time emergency decision making. And we want to make sure that the city of Jacksonville is not just producing a tool for ourselves, that we're also helping advance the field and help everyone else have something like this in their emergency centers. Next slide. And again, just to give you a sense of validation. So this was this was gauge data, and the forecast, and you can see in the hours before our forecast, our model was tracking really well with those gauges. And so that gave us a level of confidence that the projections that were going out into the future were likely to sync up with what we saw in real time. Next slide. Okay, so I know I've thrown a lot at you, and probably in a bit of a haphazard way, because again, I'm not our technical team, but this is the part of the work that I've really been excited about, and that is how do we use this data in real time. So I want to show you a couple of the applications that we're thinking about. Now, I did just share the way that real-time forecast can help with decision making during an emergency, but that base model, the HEC-RAS model, the 10,000 runs, this is some of the ways that we're thinking of using that. So if you'll go to the next slide, one of the ways we can do that is looking at damage assessment. So we can run different storm scenarios and have a sense from the National Structure Inventory where we're likely to see structures that would be impacted and the financial implications of that. So this is an example of that feature being run with Hurricane Irma with the National Structure Inventory and what the costs there were. Next slide. It also can be location specific. So we can look citywide, and we can see clusters of neighborhoods and clusters of kind of which neighborhoods are likely to see the most impacts to residential structures, commercial facilities, industrial, etc. If you'll go to the next slide, we're also able then to zoom in on one. So if we wanted to zoom in on San Marco, and I used San Marco as an example earlier, and it unfortunately has a lot of our chronic flood challenges, we're able to see better at this level exactly what structures we should be concerned about. And this mirrors exactly what we saw during Irma. Those were the places where we had the highest proportion of flood claims. And actually above, there's a small cluster above 95 where you see a number of little residential homes that are right in a big blue splotch. And that's the South Shores neighborhood. And we actually have done a voluntary buyout to those homes. So, this is really tackling our chronically flooded areas, and the ability to do that with a combined impact that goes beyond just what we were seeing from FEMA data is helping us have a better sense of where flooding could occur. I mean, this is running a historic storm, but we will be able to run kind of future projections and see best and worst case scenarios in much the same way. So we don't have to wait until Irma happens to know kind of where there could be impacts. Next slide. One of the pieces of this work that I'm really excited about is how can this tailor where we are allowing development. Jacksonville is a massive city, the largest by land area in the continental US, and only about 40% of the land is currently built out and developed. So, the remaining 60% has a lot of wetlands and forests and environments that we will probably want to keep out of the development potential. But I think the alternative is also, we could build into floodplains, or either we won't be building into current floodplains, but without understanding these combined impacts and what the future projections could be, there is the potential that we're permitting something today that could be in an area that's dealing with issues in the future. And so especially that heat map concept that I talked about earlier, where we currently have 100 scenarios that have been modeled and layered in a heat map. At the end of this, we'll have 10,000. And so I think we'll have much greater confidence on what areas we know we're going to have an impact. And then I think the opportunity there is really to look at the inverse, because there's a lot of areas in Jacksonville that we can now feel very confident are low risk of flooding. And so the planning department is currently working with an advisory committee made up of developers and development attorneys and engineers and housing advocates. And we're looking at an incentive structure to guide development towards these areas that now we can feel a lot more confident are safe and low risk, or lower risk from flooding, and really offering some incentives and bonuses for people to be building in the areas where we know we're not going to run into flood impacts. Next slide. The other piece of this is also knowing really how we can guide our capital investments, making smarter infrastructure decisions, and especially from now having that pluvial stormwater data, knowing where we have these localized issues from rainfall-induced flooding alone can help us understand how we might need to make investments in the landscape to have temporary storage capacity. So I love this image. I think it's a really great sketch of kind of how we can use public space differently. So right of way is just one type of capital investment that we do, but and Jacksonville has enough city-owned roads to, if you line them up in a straight line, you could go from Jacksonville to Los Angeles and halfway back. So the idea that we would make every stretch of roadway this holistic and have all of these features would be improbable and financially infeasible. But where we know we have issues with rainfall-induced flooding, those are the places where we now would want to tailor our roadway designs to having more bioswales or more stormwater capacity or more tree plantings, or using gray infrastructure. Those are the places where we're going to first upgrade drainage lines to be a larger pipe size. So I think I really see this as helping our capital investment be more strategic and more tailored to the conditions on the ground. And we have now better data to do that. Next slide. You can click through this, I think is animated, but the idea is we are now with this able to toggle different projections, sea level rise, rainfall. I didn't get into it here, but things like population growth and where we have more people living. Those are elements that we could start pulling into this to then have a better understanding of the cost benefit of different interventions, different events, so different levels of rainfall, wind speed, direction. That could be today, without the projections of sea level rise or rainfall intensification rate. The ability to look at combined events today is helpful. And then the kind of third piece that this helps us with is really making sure we're tailoring the right strategy to the right area. And I don't know if this happens in South Florida, but in Jacksonville, we have the neighborhood of San Marco, which I've talked about a couple of times. That is getting both coastal storm issues and king tide issues, but also really a lot of issues with pluvial flooding, heavy rainfall events. And so a pump station has been built there, but the big thing about San Marco is it's shaped like a bowl. So the only way that area is going to drain is with a pump. We have other parts of our city that have much more traditional riverine watershed topography. And so the idea of a pump station we can't drain the river out, right? And so we have to just wait for that water to recede. And I think people are starting to understand which tools work for different types of flooding. And I think a big part of that comes from this effort and making people very aware of the type of flooding, the cause of the flooding that they're seeing. And just because you're seeing standing water doesn't mean a pump is the right solution. A seawall isn't the right solution if your issue is pluvial stormwater. And so seeing how these things can kind of work to solve different types of flooding is also one of our hopes for this. And I think that's both from our perspective as city decision makers, and then also for the public to have better ways that we can explain to them what intervention is appropriate in their neighborhood. So I know I threw a lot at you. If you want to go to the next slide. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can. But Muthu Naraswamy is one of the PIs on this project from the Water Institute. I have his email here. For any of the technical questions, I would recommend you reach out to Muthu. But I'm certainly happy to answer any questions from folks in the room.
Thank you very much, Anne. Incredible presentation. So glad to see, every time I hear from you, I see more significant progress and you're moving so fast there. It's very exciting. So any questions from the audience to Anne? Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we will be, I'll circle back with you because I do have some things I want to discuss with you next.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much again. With that, we're going to move to our last presentation before around the table. There was the second presentation that was also impacted by Hurricane Helene and Milton. The Florida Flood Hub was impacted severely by the surge as well. They are dealing with some of the issues in their building, and they are addressing a lot of other needs that they have. So Tom Fraser, who was originally scheduled to be here with us in person, couldn't come. But we are very lucky to have Dr. Meechan here. He is the head of the Sea Level Rise work group within the Florida Flood Hub. So he's going to give us some updates on this specific Sea Level Rise work group and also touch some of the other efforts that we are advancing through the Florida Flood Hub. So thank you very much, Dr. Meechan, for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. Pleasure to see you again. We could go ahead and bring up the first slide. So I was going to show you here what the sort of the mission of the Florida Flood Hub is, but after seeing the previous talk by Anne, I think a better way to tell you is that what we're trying to do is to enable what they're doing in Jacksonville across the entire state of Florida. This is a statewide sort of effort, and that's basically what we're trying to do, is to develop, ultimately help people to get the science and tools that they need to do what the communities like Jacksonville and also in South Florida are already doing a great job at. Go ahead, next slide, please. The Flood Hub was created just a couple of years ago, and we're focused on different work groups. Carolina mentioned the first work group. It's called Sea Level Rise, but I think it's better to think of it as sea level in general, because we're going to be talking about other aspects of sea level change rather than just sea level rise. As Carolina mentioned, I chair this particular work group, and this was the first one created, and it's the most advanced so far in our work. So I'm going to focus on that one today and tell you about the results that we have sea level rise projections. We'll also touch briefly on our second work group, which is about rainfall and the comprehensive modeling, which is, we just heard a great talk about that, is something that we've started now too. Next slide, please. So the International Sea Level Assessment by the IPCC is used by the U.S. National Federal Task Force on Sea Level Rise, and their most recent report was in 2022. And that was basically a downscaling of the international to the U.S. coastlines. And what our group was in charge with was downscaling that to the Florida coastline. So the Federal Task Force data, their sea level rise scenarios, are produced on a one degree by 1 degree grid, or rather coarse grid, which is basically determined by the climate model resolution, the CMIP models. And this 1 degree grid that I'm showing you, the first thing we did was we interpolated this to a nominal coastline that you see here in the red line. And I extended this out beyond Florida to the Louisiana-Texas border and South Carolina-North Carolina border, just to give us some context. Next slide, please. When we take a look at this, the blue line on here is the total sea level change between 2000 and 2040. The legislation that created the Flood Hub required us to do the time horizons of 2040 and 2070. I added to that 2050, just because at the time we were doing this work, that was roughly the 30-year sort of the mortgage time scale that some people like looking at. And I'll say more about these time horizons in a moment. Key thing that we saw here, first of all, was that there's kind of a remarkable level of uniformity along the coast of Florida. The two black lines basically are on Pensacola and Jacksonville on the left and the right respectively. Between those two, we see not just in the total, but in all the contributions to the total, the vertical land motion, the ocean mass change, the ocean thermal change, all of these different components are all fairly uniform around Florida. The large signal you see to the east, to the west, that big peak, that's the vertical land motion that occurs in the Mississippi Delta. And actually it's smeared, it's not actually that wide, so it doesn't affect much of Florida. Move next slide, please. So the other thing that we saw very soon was that you can actually account for the Florida results by just simply looking at the global average, and that's in the constant sort of yellowish line there, and plus the vertical land motion. And this is the regional sort of scale vertical land motion. The first question you had was, this doesn't have any signal that you'd expect to see from regional changes in the ocean thermal and dynamical processes. First thing we were worried about is, now back up. Yes, thank you. The first thing we were worried about is, are the global models that we're running to do the climate models, are they missing something? On the other hand, it's very possible these are 19-year averages. These are climate models. It's the force signal. It goes with the the greenhouse gas changes. It's not intended to capture what we call climate variability of something like a seasonal cycle or El Nino cycles. Those are not intended to be in here, and they could cause regional differences. So as we're going forward, we're going to be looking more carefully at those sorts of processes. So again, like I said, the group is not just going to be sea level rise, but basically sea level dynamics. Okay, go next slide, please. Given that uniformity, we asked the question, first of all, if the dashed blue line here is just the average around the sea level coastline. The deviations away from that, in every case, all 15 combinations we had of the sea level rise scenarios and the sea level rise time horizons that we looked at, in every case, those changes around were small compared to the range. Now, we don't call it the uncertainty. The likely range is what the national report referred to it as. That's shown by the blue shaded area there. So the net result is that we actually have a fairly simple set of projections. And so for any given time horizon, which goes decade by decade, and any particular scenario going from low to intermediate to high, we can model Florida, the sea level rise contribution as a constant. Next slide, please. So those data have been, our work group reports to the director of the Flood Hub, which is Tom Fraser. And our work group also includes, Wes is there with you, Wes Brooks, the state resilience officer, and also Mark Raines, the state science officer. They sit on our group as ex officio members, and they've seen the whole process go through. And those data are sitting within that. There are next steps that we're going to take. This list here is actually a living document, okay? Things go on and off of it as we look into them and think about other things we might want to do. But the two that I want to focus on first are, if we take the next slide, please. In the federal report, in order to do flood risk assessment due to sea level rise changes, you have to determine what we call the exceedance probabilities. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what we're talking about. Is that if you choose a sea level rise scenario, and then the way they did it in the federal task force is they end these by the amount of temperature change by 2100, between 2081 and 2100. that tells you, if you choose intermediate, for example, and you say that the 3 degree C, the center column there, if you choose a low sea level rise scenario, there's a greater 99% chance that the sea level rise will exceed that. On down to, if you choose the intermediate, there's only a 5% chance. Knowing these exceedance probabilities, we think is probably the most useful thing that we can provide. And what I've done is, with the help of Ben Hamilton at NASA, I've now gotten the cumulative probability functions for not only the different temperature changes that you see on this figure, but also for the different SSPs, shared socioeconomic pathways, which is how the IPCC computes these things. And interestingly, in different parts of the country, they're even for different parts of Florida, some people prefer to work with the amount of temperature change by 2100. Here in Tampa Bay, we advise people based on the SSP. You know, what do we expect the emission pathway to be? I now have all of those data. We computed these exceedance probability tables now, and also the sea level rise scenario numbers for decade by decade from 2020 out to 2150. And we're putting that in front of the work group now. Once it's been reviewed by the work group, we'll be submitting that to Tom again, and also to Wes and Mark to look at. The next slide, please. The other thing that we're working on a lot is about the high tide flooding, what you all know about, I'm sure. The approach we're taking, a paper a few years ago by Phil Thompson out of the University of Hawaii. Phil is a member of my work group. Several of the other of us who are on the work group were co-authors on this paper as well. And the interesting thing here is that when it comes to the high tide flooding, the increase in the highest spring tides that you get each year varies on the nodal tidal period, the moon's nodal period, which is 18.6 years. And that signal is large enough, and we're showing you here an example from St. Petersburg. That is large enough that right now, roughly about now, we're at a maximum. Over the next 10 years, it's going to be decreasing at a rate that's nearly as fast as sea level rise is increasing. So in other words, it's masking the sea level rise signal. So the prediction then, the forecast here is that we expect about 6 days per year between now and 2033 or so. After that, though, the highest tides are increasing at a rate comparable to the sea level rise rate, meaning that over the next 10 years after that, we're going to have a tenfold increase in the number of high tide flooding days. And that's something that we've been trying to educate our communities about. The time to prepare is now. We don't have until 2050 to wait. We have to be preparing now. And the other thing about this is that we already have these numbers for all of the places where we have long tide gauge records. These calculations require you to have a record that's preferably close to a century long. So you need many decades of data to do this calculation. Another thing that's going on in the work group is I have an idea at this point. We haven't checked it out yet for how we might be able to extract data from shorter tide gauge records as short as a couple of years, 2 years maybe. We have a lot of those around the state that might be able to, might allow us to interpolate better between long tide gauge records to do this along the entire coastline of Florida with a higher resolution than is afforded by the long tide gauge records. And that one, though, is again, is still a work in progress. We'll be reporting on that probably in 6 months or so. And next slide. The second work group that we have is the rainfall work group. And this group started with a set of depth, duration, frequency curves that were developed by the USGS and the South Florida area. And the first job was, let's extend those to the state, to the entire state. And they made excellent progress on that, but their group started later than mine. So it's still in progress. And I sit on that group as well. And one of the interesting things is, and Carolina and I discussed it yesterday a bit, is that the South Florida results were based on the previous generation of the coupled models, the CMEP5, as they're called. The group is now producing a set of curves for the entire state based on the newer CMEP6 models. And Carolina might have more to say about that, but I'll leave it at that for now. The last slide, please. There's one more slide. Okay, well, I'll just.
There was one
no, don't
slide,
worry about it.
Yvette, there was the slide after the blank
Don't
one,
worry about it,
that
Yvette.
it has the position description. It's an
Okay.
important one. Give us a second.
There's no need, Carolina. I can just tell you. One of the things that I wanted to say is part of the charge to the Florida Flood Hub, as I said, is that we need to be doing these things statewide, everywhere. And there you go. And no, back up. There you go, right there. Thank you. Part of the plan as the Flood Hub was we're going to have a number of people that we call liaisons, that these people are supposed to interface with communities all around the state of Florida. So if you're in Jacksonville, you've got great things going on there. South Florida, you're in Tampa Bay, we're doing a good job. But in many communities along the coastlines, they don't have the resources to actually do these kinds of things on their own. And these people are intended to be an interface between the Flood Hub in being able to help them do that. And we're bringing on the first 3 of these very soon. And so I think that's going to be good news for a lot of our smaller communities in the state. And I'm going to leave it at that. I was asked to keep it to 15 minutes, and I think that was about right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gary. Any question for Dr. Meachin? Yeah.
Hey, Gary, it's Wes.
Yes.
Thank you for all your hard work. I am not an expert in sea level rise, but you make me feel like one, having gone through this process. So just really appreciate all that. I just wanted to add on to some of what you said. So the state is looking at the sea level rise data and analysis that Flood Hub provided, and we're actually working right now to build that onto a tide gauge elevation data set for all the long-range NOAA tidal gauges. Because those of you who work with the Resilient Florida program, you know that part of your vulnerability assessment requirements is to basically tie your vulnerability to some of the tide gauge data. So with the state, under my leadership and with DEP, we're looking to actually build that data set for you for easy reference and easy incorporation. So we're, I think, nearly done with that and hope to get that out very shortly as well. And that should make everybody's lives a lot easier in meeting the statutory requirements. And then obviously when the working group has finished their work with the decadal data that we're really excited about, I'm excited about seeing through 2150, we'll likewise build that into the data set and data table that we're developing. So a lot of awesome progress. Gary, my question for you is, I'm hoping, and I don't know if I missed it, but I'm hoping you can also share an update on Flood Hub's effort to add more tide gauges to our network.
Yeah, so the other thing, I didn't mention it just in the space of time that I had, but what we have done already is that we've collected all the tide gauge data around the state of Florida. We also had a very extensive set of relatively short tide gauge records that were done within DEP that we didn't know about as part of their survey and mapping group that was setting high tide elevations that we're analyzing. We're also quality controlling all of those data. I was the founding director of the University of Hawaii Sea Level Center, and we developed a set of quality control procedures when I was there, and we're applying those to all of these records. And so we will be making those data, which I think a value-added sort of tide gauge data set available to you. In addition to that, I have another project, a separate project, where I can install probably on the order of 20 or so tide gauges, possibly more, to what we call densify the network. I don't know if you all probably know where we have long tide gauge records from NOAA in the state of Florida. And one calculation that I do, that I tell people about sometimes, is Florida has, depending on how you define it, 2 to 3 times the coastline of California. We have 1/3 the number of long tide gauge records. So we're woefully undercovered. And so Wes is referring to this project I have to try to densify the network. And we've already started on that. And the other thing is, I should mention too, is, Wes and Mark sit on my work group meetings and they listen. And the nice thing about that is that it's very helpful for us to have essentially the end user represented, so that Wes can ask us questions about and give us information about what's needed. That's very helpful to me too, Wes, and I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Any other question, Dr. Mitchell? And thank you for mentioning the Rainfall Work Group too, Gary. Yes, we have, for South Florida, we have been using the data that was produced earlier on, which was then extended statewide. So there is definitely data out there in terms of future extreme rainfall projections using the last generation. It's part of the metrics hub, so everybody in South Florida has it, and the data released from the USGS of the statewide product is also available. But now the exciting part is really bringing the new generation. So the report that is being prepared by the Rainfall Work Group, we really incorporate the latest and greatest data that is produced by those global climate models under the last generation, CMIP6, while we develop our generation here, our models that are going to be really representing Florida. So anyway, a lot to come, and excited to be working in partnership with the Florida Food Hub on those two efforts, bringing CMIP6 and also developing a model for our state. Okay, thank you very much. I think the last part of this is just going around the table for some updates. So I will start with Boynton Beach.
Thank you. My name is Alana Irwin. I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Administrator for the City of Boynton Beach. We've been working on a lot of capital improvement projects, mainly to improve our stormwater drainage flow. We just wrapped up a couple projects in our intracoastal area that we were working with HMGP grants. So we're really excited to see how the flooding improves, especially during king tide events. We're also working on climate adaptation planning right now. We have a Resilient Florida program planning grant in the amount of $300,000 to come up with an adaptation plan, mainly focused on flooding. Our area is significantly urbanized, so we have a lot of rainfall-induced flooding, king tide flooding, some of the compound flooding that Jacksonville mentioned, just not to the degree since we're much smaller, but we're very excited to start this planning process to help supplement our vulnerability assessment. We're also working on a species floodplain assessment for our community rating system for the CRS. We're trying to achieve a score of 4 to improve the flood insurance rates for our residents. So our timeline for that is we have the assessment going on now, and then we're going to be generating a plan hopefully around spring. So once we get that plan approved by our commission, we will have enough points to move our CRS score to the next rating. So we're really excited about that as well. And then the last thing is Palm Beach County, I believe back in August, adopted the LMS revisions for the local mitigation strategy, and Boynton Beach just adopted those revisions into our ordinances in November. So we can continue to work on receiving FEMA funding for our CIP and flooding projects in our communities. So we're doing a lot to try to work with our community and work with the areas that are burdened by flooding to reduce those risks. So those are a lot of the stuff we're working on right now.
Excellent, thank you. Menashi?
Thank you. Meenakshi Chaba, Everglades Foundation. Um, I have a question really for any of you. So we saw the great example from Jacksonville for modeling and mapping compound flooding. What does the district see as a series of like recommendations for different regions, say for example, Broward or Miami-Dade, to, besides pointing to the comprehensive plan down the line, what can they do to accelerate this process? Self-motivated, or somehow maybe there should be some series of recommendations, technical as well as policy-wise, to address this issue. And I see this as regional and large-scale modeling and mapping, as well as efforts to accelerate end-user measures that can be, or applications that can be used by end users to help inform the risk they face.
So at the district, we have two ongoing projects right now. One, we are going to be testing Sphinx, the same tool that was just advertised by Jacksonville. It's only for the coastal areas, of course. It's more on the coastal side. We continue on the investments on the tool for the inland, more rainfall-driven areas that we have the MIC models. So we're going to see how we can combine and enhance some of the projections. We do use MIC, and we are able to capture some of the coastal processes with those tools as well. We made significant progress with the 216 on that front, but we're going to be testing Sphinx too, and the capacity to run some additional model runs. So the second effort on the compound flooding front is also a proposal we are working with ERDC for about a year now. We got the approval. They're working on new fiscal year funding. And this is combining then HAC, a more regional scale HAC, or other similar tools, again, with EDSORC and other coastal processes. We do not have a final, well, the proposal has a final scope that is now being adjusted to the resources available in the timeline, but it's the path that we are looking to have the tools that will be necessary when we start the comprehensive study. So we have until January to finalize this work plan to be able to hopefully start this effort with also ERDC to invest on those tools. In terms of translating all of that to measures and the way, a little bit of what was also detailed by the incredible presentation from Ann here. You don't just get the models, you really digest those results and facilitate how you can really read that in terms of decision-making, infrastructure investments, and all of that. I think this is going to be definitely part of the process that we have as we advance those studies. Right now, we have a big focus on advancing these 216, 203, which are key for the chronic flooding issues that she also mentioned, like the day-to-day rainfall. Our system is already underperformance that we need to really address now, to address those chronic, the day-to-day issues that we have. But yes, there are multiple fronts in terms of combining all of that with the coastal risks as well, including some specific studies like the Miami Bayback study. I don't know if you want to add anything, Tim, as part of your integration effort.
No, I think you covered most of it. I would just add, I think efforts like what the city of Jacksonville showed on the local scale, that kind of helps identify the major issues, which can then lead to federal support. So I think that's from our perspective, those are really vital to identifying where federal support could be needed and getting an authorization for the Corps to participate. Unfortunately, we can't investigate and identify those ourselves. It has to be through an authorization. But I think through those local efforts to kind of identify those issues, I think the resilience planning efforts that all the counties are doing, all of those types of things go a long way toward establishing where the issues are and where there could be federal involvement down the road.
Answer your question. Yes, Miami-Dade County.
So it's afternoon now. Good afternoon. Nice seeing you again, Dr. Moran. Robin Yang is our mitigation planner. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. and I can't speak on a lot of the projects that are currently being undertaken by a lot of our municipalities. He could not be here today because he's busy finalizing the local mitigation strategy plan that is coming up for public review. So he's working hard on that. Going forward, I will be accompanying Robin Yang to a lot of South Florida Water Management District, a lot of the meetings and different conferences and seminars that are representative of the Water Management District. I failed to mention I am an emergency management coordinator. I'm the new resilience officer for Miami-Dade County for emergency management. So Robin Yang and I will be working very closely together in the future, speaking on behalf of a lot of the projects that are being sponsored and supported by Miami-Dade County. A lot of what I'm working on for resilience is more of an engagement. FEMA just released a resilience guidance that's a lot focused on being more connected with the community, doing more stakeholder engagement. So the framework document that I'm currently working on focuses on a lot of that focus with the community. The last meeting that we attended where you were speaking a lot on the canal projects that are currently in process, we want to inform the community and all of our municipalities about a lot of those projects, a lot of the sea level rise, a lot of the climate adaptation that's taking place. That will be more of my role. Robin will, of course, be speaking a lot of the grant funding, those notice of funding opportunities with the municipalities. And my goal and focus as the resilience coordinator will just be supporting them and helping the community understand the importance of it and just making it more interactive and just interfacing with them a lot. So that's all I have right now for Miami-Dade County, and I look forward to future engagements, as I said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you have not, I'm sure you have, but if you have not fully connected with Nicole Cortez, she's going to be the best person. She's sitting on the back. She's definitely, a lot of the work that she does for us overlaps with the work that you just described. So excited to have you there in this position. And she has all the projects and information that is needed to make sure that you have it all represented in the update of the plan. And also, again, any kind of communication, engagement, information that you need, she's able to provide all of that to you, and she does this role for us here at the South Florida Water Management District. Hey, good to see you.
Good afternoon. My name is Scarlett Cantley, and I'm the Administration and Grants Coordinator for Indian Trail Improvement District. Indian Trail is a independent special district. So what's unique about us is all of our funding comes from our residents. So grants are very important for us. When Resilient Florida first came out with resilient funds, special districts were not eligible. So we worked with Palm Beach County, and they actually applied for our first grant for us for a project that we had ready to go. And my update on that is it was our M2 bypass project, and we just did the bidding, the construction bidding for that. So that's entering into the construction phase. So that was our first grant through and the help of Palm Beach County. But it's a good process, and we were, thanks to Palm Beach County sponsoring us with that, we were able to do that. And we have a couple of the hazard mitigation grants. And the only thing with that is we're kind of at a standstill because of the 404 situation. We had just entered into the environmental process, and that's when, the judge made that with the 404 process. So we're kind of in a standstill with those. We still have them, but until, others outside of my job, decide what's best to do, we're at a standstill with those.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, coordinate with us as needed on all this process. We are here in case you need any support. Okay, do you want to go next, Dania Beach?
Thank you so much, everybody, for your presentations. We're with Dania Beach. My name is John Quintero. Just to update you guys, we have our stormwater master plan underway, planning out projects for the next 20, 30 years. And we've started our Southeast Drainage Project, which is our largest drainage project for residential. It's about 7 streets by 3 avenues, and that includes 2 pumps and 24 injection wells. So we're looking forward to seeing the efficacy of that. And we're very happy to hear about the study in Broward County for upgrades to our gate system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we have been coordinating very closely with you all on this, so happy to be able to make progress on that as well. Okay, Charlotte County.
Good afternoon. Brandon Moody, Water Quality Manager with Charlotte County. I'm joined today by Molly Holland, our new Resiliency and Grants Manager. So that's our big news is we're actually growing in our department with a greater focus on resiliency and resiliency-related issues. Beyond that, we have multiple resiliency-related efforts going on between the Watershed Master Plan, the Vulnerability Assessment Modeling. The Corps is working on a storm risk management study for the Gulf Coastline. So it's a lot of just kind of herding these modeling cats right now, and we're starting that process of evaluating all of them and make sure that the stories being told by all of them align with one another so that we can more easily communicate what these things are saying to the general public, which has gained a lot of increased interest thanks to Hurricanes Milton and Helene, which impacted a little under 6,000 homes in unincorporated Charlotte County, severely damaged or destroyed about 2,700. That does not include what happened in the city of Punta Gorda, which also received some pretty dramatic impacts. So that number, total number for the area in Charlotte County is certainly higher. So if there's any kind of silver lining that comes from events like this, it's that it prompts that renewed interest from the public and engagement from the public on some of the work that's being done here. And that's an opportunity for people like me to capitalize on that and try to gain and perpetuate more engagement in the future as the memories of these events start to kind of slowly fade away. So that's one thing that we're working on right now. The other thing, and I was interested to hear about the tide gauge network because this is a drum we've been banging for some time, the lack of tidal gauges in Charlotte Harbor and Inland Bay in that area, basically from Tampa Bay to Fort Myers. So we put in an appropriations request last year for tide gauges. It wasn't quite successful. My understanding is we're going to do it again, and we received approval through BRIC funding to go ahead and apply for that as well. So there's a couple avenues we're going to go through to try to get this, but it would be great to connect with Dr. Mitchum and the Flood Hub to kind of find out what they're thinking in terms of gaps and see if we can better coordinate these asks and these efforts while we're communicating with the state. So, and as always, thank you very much for y'all's efforts in continuing to kind of coordinate and bring all of us together and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Brendan. It was always good to see you, connect with you. Okay, I think I'm going to close quickly. I'm going to start with, I don't know if we have yet a lot of the online participants there, but I did receive a few emails this morning about conflicts and last-minute conflicts and also some other impediments that they couldn't be here. I would love to hear updates if you are there, one of the counties and municipalities that could not be here with us today. First, thank you for the message. Thank you very much for reaching out and kind of sharing the limitations. But mostly, if you have important updates, I'm more than happy to include them in the follow-up email after this forum. I always send a follow-up email. So if there is any important update from counties and local municipalities out there that you want to be sharing with the others, please just send it to me and I'll include in the follow-up email. I want to reinforce a few points here quickly. Funding, Dr. Brooks mentioned in the beginning of this event about upcoming funding. We understand the process of applying for those projects require some resources, data, models, and tools. If there is anything that we can provide to assist you on this process, I mean, we have level of service models out there that are very helpful in assessing things, including your vulnerability assessment down in Boynton. So they are available through our SMMS, so the statewide model management system. So really the tools, the models are there if you need some of the results. We have data. We have even tools that can help on the BCA side. The BCA side is usually the most time consuming. So we have data that could be fed into Fiat, which is an open source tool that can really help you on those steps. So, I mean, if there is something, we can definitely not do very true review of all those grant applications, but if there is any data or tool or even model that we can provide to assist you all in doing this and justifying your projects, please reach out. I mean, it's significant funding that is coming, and if there is a way that we can assist on getting the communities ready, we are here for that. I really wanted Pete to be here. He had to leave, but I wanted to mention just one point on the saltwater intrusion map. I love the way that this was delivered. I mean, we do have a serious concern with saltwater intrusion, sea level rise, but we see a lot of actions that have been taken throughout those years that put us in a condition that is not necessarily alarming, right? We saw a lot of things that the communities are doing, the utilities are building, have been building through all those years to increase some of the resiliency. I mean, it's data out there, it's information out there, it's awareness of this, early on action, and we can see that we have kind of somehow a very proactive adaptation, ongoing adaptation that is going on, not only by the utilities, of course, there is a lot of actions by utilities, but us also very truly committed on ensuring water levels in the system that can help on the recharge. So again, just a minute to celebrate as we deal with those complex issues on progress, significant progress. We are so much better than other states because of the things we have been doing in Florida in terms of water supply and saltwater intrusion, and we need to be able to celebrate that as well. I want to touch quickly on the importance and our focus. To answer your question one more time, Anashi, we are 100% committed to those efforts that we have right now, 216, 203, and a parallel FPLOS efforts that are really allowing us to address those chronic flooding issues in the CNSF system underperformance in the areas that are dealing with flooding issues on a daily basis today. But we continue to be 100% committed in tying in the coastal piece of that in collaboration with the Corps and other agencies. We understand this is also part of that, and we'll come as soon as we are able to make progress on those other fronts as well. So excited, very excited to be moving significant steps on this 203, 216 route, which we are in there for almost 2 years now, but we are really seeing progress now. We are really going to move fast. Along with the BRIC grants, I mean, we're designing those structures already. We are getting out there and doing kind of purchasing land, doing design, geotech, all of that is happening right now, which is exciting to be here, seeing the things really moving to a next level. And I need to really thank everybody that is involved. I mean, all you hear here is expedited schedule on all of those things, both on the FEMA front and on the 203. There is a lot of people out there, consultants, the Army Corps team, our team here at the district that is dedicating extra hours for us to really accomplish all those deadlines and the schedules. So I really need to say thank you one more time for everybody that is helping us to walk on this aggressive schedules that we have for those efforts. And then, I think we saw how we understand those things together and the importance of looking at those things more comprehensively and also bringing the compound flooding issue. Like, I love the case from Ann there. I mean, we see progress and we see some next steps that really help us to kind of go back and ensure that don't let it go, because we are so overwhelmed with those like extreme aggressive schedules, but we are there and we are going to continue to invest on those tools that we need to bring to the system to be able to do more comprehensive assessments. And finally, thank you for the Flood Hub. Again, same thing, we are seeing so much progress right now from the liaisons that are coming out, 3 in each water management district to support us here and coordinate with some of the local governments, which is excellent, to the progress they are making on those work groups, and also now the statewide effort and this flood mapping inventory. All of that is so relevant to us as a statewide effort, and we are really excited to be partnering and supporting the investment and the advances that are coming. So excited to the next steps there too. With that, I don't know if you want to end. Yeah.
Sorry, and I just wanted to thank everybody for their patience with my distracting everybody running up and down all day today. The Water Resources Development Act was released late last night, and we've really been coordinating on some really important state priorities, including for the Water Management District down here. And so I won't share any of the details right now, but I just want to thank our congressional delegation for all that they're doing behind the scenes right now to make sure that that package is as robust as we need it to be.
So thank you everyone that was here. Thank you everyone online. Happy holidays. I will see you all next year. Thank you.